Chapter 101, Zodiac Theme. Lightning Strike. Utah opened the Devil Tome, and a cascade of azure lightning fell from the sky, crashing down onto Scorpio's black carapace. Crackling. The black armor instantly turned red-hot from the extreme temperature. Then, it was pierced clean through. A rush of purple blood gushed out, splattering across the ground. But the moment the tender red flesh was exposed, it began regenerating at a rapid pace, covering over the black carapace again. Utah's expression froze, and she muttered in frustration, completely ineffective. This type of creature, even iron weapons can't suppress its regeneration speed. Psycho pulled out the Veranium sword she had embedded in Scorpio. In less than a second, the wound had already healed completely. Even someone like Psycho had no real countermeasure against such regeneration. Fortunately, they were only here to gain experience. Lynn was still the main force. So, what followed was Psycho and the rest, who had been promoted to mid-class devils, unleashing all of their skills on Scorpio. It wasn't until they were nearly drained of strength that Lynn pulled them out. Huff, huff. The girls panted heavily, tended to by Yuako and the others. Utah, still catching her breath, said, "It consumed so much energy. And it's such a massive creature, we should earn a lot of experience, right?" Kisara suddenly chimed in, "Is it possible to directly upgrade to a high-class devil?" Utah rolled her eyes at her. "You just became a mid-class devil a few days ago, and now you are already dreaming about high class?" Psycho thought about it for a moment and said, "Since we weren't the main attackers, we shouldn't expect too much. But..." Thinking back on the slaughter she had taken part in earlier, Psycho subconsciously licked her lips and smiled. "We did kill a lot of stage 4 Gastria. That should still result in a decent improvement." Hearing that, Utah responded with a complicated expression, "Psycho, you'll be fine. You might even be ready to level up." After all, before the last crusade, Psycho's stats were already close to the threshold. And now? Utah bit her lip slightly, feeling a bit unwilling. Psycho smiled without saying anything. Her goal was to become Lynn's sharpest blade. There was no time to waste. In her daily life, if Lynn didn't give orders, she would continue to hunt and kill. Dash. Lynn narrowed his eyes. Zodiac? Scorpio? What the hell is this? A stage V apoptosis creature got stuffed in. Suddenly, the evil piece flickered. Unable to resist, Lynn tapped it, only for a startled voice to ring out. "Master, that hurt." Lynn. Confused, he watched as a petite and slender figure emerged from the vast starry void. As the image solidified, Lynn could make out her appearance. Her tail was a gradient of deep night black fading to violet, with a wisp of wine-red hair at the crown of her head. Her hairstyle was an asymmetrical double spiral ponytail, with the right side tied in a barbed gothic ribbon. Her eyes shimmered like liquid amber, and within her pupils were scorpion tail-shaped patterns. Lynn blinked. "Are you Scorpio?" "Yes, Master." Her voice was sweet as she blinked and gazed up at Lynn. "Lynn? No way. Did the system really just give him a Zodiac-themed companion? Why you? Stella O'Brien. Master can just call me Stella." Lynn rubbed his temples. "So, what's the situation right now?" With a playful tone and a finger to her lips, Stella replied. Master just signed a contract with me." "Contract?" Lynn was even more confused. But after listening to her explanation, he looked at her speechlessly. It was basically the same as the contract system used in his peerage. "So, what abilities do you have now?" Stella thought for a moment, then smiled. "For now, I can summon a phantom of Scorpio." "Lynn, that sounds useless. Summon a phantom to hit people?" Stella pouted. "It'll be different once my sisters arrive." Lynn's mouth twitched. "You expect me to collect the rest of the Zodiac too?" Stella blinked. "Master doesn't want to." Lynn paused. Well, he did want to. Mainly because of his collecting obsession. The skill clearly listed the Zodiac, and right now there was only Scorpio. It made him feel unbearably itchy. His OCD was acting up hard. Stella giggled and said, Master, I have another function." Under Lynn's curious gaze, Stella turned into a rainbow beam and floated high into the starry sky. Lynn was stunned for a moment, then rubbed his chin and muttered with a strange look, "So, there'll be a Scorpio in this starry sky from now on." He turned to glance at the other empty spots. Gemini, Virgo, Aquarius. It really was empty. Also, wasn't there a missing sun? So, where would the sun go? Seeing Stella hanging in the starry sky, Lynn stood quietly for a while before exiting the Evil Peace starfield. He had a strange feeling. Evil Peace felt like it was nurturing an entire universe. He shook his head and set those thoughts aside for now. The current starfield in Evil Peace was still over 100,000 miles from completion. He had a long way to go. One step at a time. Closing the personal panel, Lynn walked over to Utah and the others. Then his gaze shifted, farther into the distance. Far away. The blonde cursed child hiding behind some ruins stiffened. Ah, discovered. Her voice was flat and mechanical, like she was reading off a script. Even though she was far away, the hearing abilities of devils were terrifying. Psycho and the others turned to the source of the sound. There was a peculiar light in their eyes. A little bug slipped in. Psycho's tone remained calm. Mid-class devil. Race, devil. Master, Lynn. Strength, SSS 1378. Agility, SS 1096. Durability, SS 1035. Magic, SS 1028. Inherent skills. Yearning for killing, omitted. Blade Devil, omitted. Development ability, Swordsman I. After seeing Psycho's updated blessings data, Lynn nodded inwardly. Just as expected. Then he said, alright, looks like that's your limit. But, that was fast. Lynn sighed with a hint of admiration. Psycho exhaled softly and smiled. She whispered, then I'll leave it to you, Master. Lynn nodded behind her. Level up. HNNGNN. A soft, sultry moan escaped, causing Mahiru and the others to blush. Why did Psycho make such a provocative sound? She must have done it on purpose. A short while later, her blessings were updated. Busujima Psycho. High-class devil. Race, devil. Master, Lynn. Strength, I0. Agility, I0. Durability, I0. Magic, I0. Inherent skills. Slaughter Vision, omitted. Blade Devil, omitted. Black Eclipse Blade. Bacterial Resonance, absorbs trace amounts of enterovirus during attacks with her weapon, converts it into physical stamina recovery. Blood Slaughter Awakening, during consecutive kills, her weapon becomes covered in black erosion lines, final attack range increases by 200%. This is... Lynn was surprised. Seeing a skill related to the Gastria virus in the list, he suddenly understood. So, it was a result of killing too many Gastria. Lynn copied Psycho's blessings info for records. Psycho immediately noticed her new rank. High-class devil. Now she could be even more useful to her master. Then she looked further down and noticed the new skill. Black Eclipse Blade. Psycho tilted her head in confusion. It's probably from the Gastria you've been fighting. Lynn gave his guess. Anyone who saw the mention of the virus could likely connect the dots. After hearing his explanation, Psycho nodded in realization. But... Lynn rubbed his chin. This skill's only useful in the Black Bullet world. It offered stamina regeneration, after all. But only in the presence of the Gastria virus. Once Psycho left this world, the skill would become half useless. Psycho smiled nonchalantly. Better than nothing. And... a hint of crimson flickered in Psycho's eyes. This just means I can kill better here, and earn more experience. Yuta twitched her lips. She almost said what was on everyone's mind, this woman's a total maniac. Seeing Psycho unlock a new skill, Maiko suddenly had a thought, does that mean we can awaken skills like that too? The idea got her a little excited. Her Spirit Seer Devil was basically useless. It worked great against spirits but normal enemies? Completely ineffective. She could only rely on the stat boosts of a mid-class devil, but even then, she desperately wanted to learn how to use magic better. Unless she could raise some powerful cursed spirits. But so far, she hadn't encountered one strong enough. And even if she did, she couldn't enslave it. So basically, useless. If awakening new skills was possible, maybe she had a chance? Maiko was hopeful. New skills. The others perked up at her speculation. But soon after, their excitement died down. Tisk. Yuta pouted. Only Psycho gets the good stuff. Maiko also looked dejected. Her hopes for a new skill were dashed. Lynn gently patted her on the back and offered an alternative idea. If you can't enslave a powerful cursed spirit, why not try befriending one and signing a contract? Contract. Maiko's expression brightened slightly. But... did she really have to befriend cursed spirits? Her face stiffened again. Even now, she still hadn't recovered from being scared half to death by cursed spirits. Cursed spirits, every last one of them deserves to die. Thinking back to her past encounters, Maiko felt both ashamed and frustrated. Her body heated up. Her temperature rose, visibly red. Lynn continued updating everyone's blessings one by one. The stat values of Yuta and the other mid-class devils increased significantly, though none reached the threshold for promotion. Meanwhile, the lower-ranked devils like Yuako and Hana advanced to mid-class rank. But aside from the level upgrade, there weren't any major changes. Hana's development ability advanced to Boxer I. It was likely due to her frequently wrapping her fists in aura and punching things head-on. Yuako's development ability was Netherworld Resistance I. Immune to mental erosion caused by curse-type skills, in dark environments or areas of negative energy, total stats increase by 20%. That's a very solid development ability, Lynn commented. Yuako grinned and immediately pounced on Lynn, rubbing her forehead against him playfully. Master, when will you come taste this ghost? Yuako's narrow eyes curled into mischievous slits as she smiled. Lynn twitched slightly. Lynn patted her. Come to my room tonight. Yuako's eyes lit up instantly. The 60-year-old virgin was finally going to give up her precious first time tonight. Then, Master, you better wait for me. With that, Yuako practically floated away in bliss. Though technically, she already floated to begin with. Watching her, Yuta curled her lips and said nothing. She was just a bit curious. What does it feel like if it's with a ghost? Mahiru opened her mouth slightly, then closed it and pursed her lips with a trace of frustration. She'd known this day would come. Yuako had been way too proactive with Mr. Lin. Always flirting at the slightest opportunity. This was just the natural conclusion. But, wasn't she here before Yuako? The most frustrated one was Maiko. Another one. She mumbled to herself. Hey, Maiko, weren't you the first to become part of Minister Lin's peerage? Hannah asked curiously, so, did you ever get into Master's bed? Get into bed? Maiko's face flushed bright red as she looked at Hannah in shock. What a bold thing to say. Then again, considering it was Hannah, maybe it wasn't too surprising. But, it still hurt a little, Hannah. If I cut you open, you're not secretly black-hearted, are you? Seeing Maiko's reaction, Hannah's expression lit up with a smug I see look. Maiko's face darkened. Don't look at me like that. I'm embarrassed enough about not having climbed onto his bed yet. Just as she was fuming internally, Hannah suddenly said with serious conviction, Don't worry, Maiko. I'll help you. What, Hannah? Maiko stuttered, completely thrown off. What's she helping with? Help her get into Master's bed? How would she even help with that? She was both embarrassed and curious. Definitely not because she wanted to know how. Hannah gave her a confident look and patted her shoulder like a big sister giving guidance. Don't worry, Maiko. Once I climb into Master's bed, I'll help you too. Hi. Maiko's eyes went wide. I didn't expect you to be that kind of Hannah. You say you'll help your bestie but you're the one jumping into bed first. Friendship over. Friendship over. Maiko stared at her, full of regret. Hannah, you're no good. On the other side, it was finally Kisara's turn to have her blessings updated. She was full of anticipation and quickly took off her top, waiting for Lynn to begin. The next moment, Lynn's hand pressed against her smooth back. The blessings data surfaced. Tendo Kisara. Mid-class devil. Race, devil. Master, Lynn Valifor. Strength, C613. Agility, C687. Durability, E437. Magic, E497. Tendo Ryumenkyo Kaden, omitted. Ghost Sword, omitted. Revenge Devil, omitted. Elegy of the Sorrowful Wish, omitted. Lynn examined the data carefully. Her level hadn't changed, but your stats increased quite a bit. Thanks to Tendo Ryumenkyo Kaden, Kisara's strength and agility were climbing rapidly. Plus, she'd been doing a lot of killing lately. And, just like Psycho, a new skill appeared. Elegy of the Sorrowful Wish. Hate Mark, increases damage dealt to Gastria-type creatures by 50%. Declaration of the End, the next attack will strike the target's weak point. Just like Psycho's new skill, it was another ability tied to Gastria creatures. But, that Declaration of the End effect seemed pretty good. Lynn copied Kisara's updated blessings data. Kisara looked through her own status screen and laughed as she spotted the new skill. She wasn't that far behind Psycho. After finishing the blessings updates, Lynn turned toward Tina. Now it's your turn. Tina blinked and pointed at herself, slightly stunned. Lynn nodded without a word. Tina paused, then silently began to undress. Then she turned her back to Lynn. Lynn summoned the evil piece and placed his hand on her back. The blessings information appeared. Tina Sprout. Low-class devil. Race, devil. Master, Lynn Valifor. Strength, I0. Agility, I0. Durability, I0. Magic, I0. Inherent skills. Owl-type Gastria factor, all attributes increased during nighttime combat. Battlefield topology, automatically generates a 3D tactical map by analyzing terrain, airflow, and sound. Not a special type devil. But she already had 2 inherent skills. Battlefield topology. She had the makings of a battlefield commander. Lynn copied her blessings info and explained her current state. After a while, Tina's expression lit up with realization. She looked at her wings and muttered, so, this is why the cursed children vanished, devils. The so-called children of the devil had finally become actual devils. And, The characteristics of the Gastria virus were completely gone, which meant they no longer needed to worry about transforming into Gastria. Tina was dazed. It felt like the goddess of luck had smiled on her. No. More accurately, Tina had been chosen by her current master, Lynn. She silently looked up and engraved Lynn's face into her heart. He was the savior of the cursed children. Even if he was a devil. She took a deep breath, bowed low, and spoke solemnly. Thank you for giving me a new life. In that moment, she even felt grateful to Ayn Rand for assigning her this mission. But she looked up again, expression serious. I'm familiar with Osaka and America. Please let me assist with those 2 locations. Tina had made her decision. She would act as a guide. And bring back every last cursed child. Lynn patted her head and entrusted her with the mission. All right, I'll leave it to you. However, he wasn't fully confident in her current condition. If he remembered correctly, didn't she have a setting where she couldn't stay awake during the day due to the owl factor? He wasn't sure if that weakness had been erased after her devil transformation. Lynn shook his head and moved on to the next task. Cursed children from around the world were arriving one after another. He needed to transform them into devils as soon as possible to purge the Gastria virus from their bodies and put them at ease. By the time everything was wrapped up, it was already late at night. Lynn's bedroom. Master, I'm here. Yuako floated through the wall. Lynn's eyelid twitched. What are you wearing? Yuako looked down at herself, puzzled. Master doesn't like it. She wore a pure white, loose robe, with a white triangular headscarf on her forehead. Several faint blue ghost lights floated around her. She looked exactly like a traditional ghost. No, I like it just fine. Lynn pulled her down from mid-air. As Yuako let out a surprised yelp, the ghost lights in the room flickered wildly. The next day, Yuako's pink tongue gently licked Lynn's skin. Master, how did it taste? Her narrow eyes sparkled mischievously as her fingers drew circles on Lynn's chest. Compared to Yuta and the others, it should be a little different, right? Lynn touched his chin, looking serious. I think, this kind of thing needs to be verified with more experiments before reaching a solid conclusion. Yuako paused and rolled her eyes in annoyance. Her gaze shifted playfully, and she floated naked into the air again. There are plenty of perks to being a ghost. For example, unlocking stranger positions is way easier, right? Suddenly, Lynn narrowed his eyes and exhaled slowly with satisfaction. A fully automated ghost cup. Perfect. Afternoon. After handing off all matters related to the Black Bullet world to his peerage, Lynn was finally free. Apartment, living room. Lynn was currently in the middle of another round of fighting with Konako. Off to the side. Midori Fuse puffed up her cheeks and glared at the white-haired girl nestled comfortably in their master's arms. She felt like her territory was being threatened. Her hair puffed up in agitation. Konako absent-mindedly played her video game, occasionally glancing at Midori. Then her gaze settled on the cat ears atop Midori's head. After a brief silence, she casually dispelled the magic concealing her own ears. Lynn looked down and asked curiously, Konako, why are your ears exposed? Konako pursed her lips. My magic is a little unstable. Unstable magic? Lynn looked at her oddly but didn't say anything further. Midori Fuse, stare. This shameless cat. Definitely intentional. Konako pursed her lips and whispered, Senpai, my ears are itchy. She was asking for a head pat. Lynn paused for a moment, then smiled faintly and placed his hand on her head. His broad fingers gently stroked her soft, furry ears. MNN. Konako shivered slightly, her body instinctively squirming. Her thighs pressed together, and her breathing grew faintly heavier. Lynn froze. Could it be? Is she going into heat? Lynn's expression stiffened. He recalled that for feline mandrills, going into heat before maturity could be dangerous, even life-threatening, right? With that in mind, Lynn immediately withdrew his hand. Konako looked up at him, eyes slightly misty, staring at Lynn blankly. As if wondering why he suddenly stopped. Just as Lynn was about to come up with an excuse, Midori suddenly squeezed in between them. Master! She threw herself into Lynn's arms, tears brimming in her eyes. The feeling of abandonment stung too much. At this point, she didn't care about being shy. Master is going to be stolen. Seeing her like that, Lynn gently placed his hand on Midori's head and rubbed it softly. He. The moment she felt his touch, Midori's expression shifted instantly, her face melting into a goofy smile. Konako paused and stared silently at Midori. The strange sensation from earlier faded away. Seeing this, Lynn let out a quiet sigh of relief. Looks like she wasn't actually in heat. Still, he hadn't expected such a reaction just from stroking her ears. He'd have to be more careful in the future. Although, watching the subtle rivalry unfold between Konako and Midori, Lynn started to feel. Maybe raising 2 cats isn't so bad after all. He wondered if there was any possibility of convincing Rias to let Konako transfer over. Just as the girls were subtly competing for Lynn's attention, the apartment's doorbell rang. Lynn raised his eyebrows. Who could it be at this hour? His peerage members were still in the Black Bullet world grinding for experience. Could it be Natsuki Minamiya? Master. I'll get the door. Midori immediately stopped fussing with Konako and dashed over. She wanted to be the thoughtful one. As soon as the door opened, she was greeted by a beautiful girl wearing slim-framed glasses, exuding a calm and intellectual aura. Midori blinked and asked, confused, who are you? She had never seen this big sister before. Which meant, she probably wasn't one of the peerage members. Seeing Midori, Sana's eyes showed a flicker of surprise. Sana Satrai. She calmly introduced herself, then asked, excuse me, is Lynn here? Master. Midori was stunned, then quickly stepped aside. Please, come in. Master. She's part of Lynn's peerage? Walking into the living room, Sana appeared visibly tense. But, the moment she saw Konako curled up in Lynn's lap, her steps froze. A glint of surprise flashed through her eyes. Why was a member of Rias's peerage here with Lynn? And they were so close. She clenched her fist subconsciously. Then took a deep breath to calm herself. But a faint chill flickered in Sana's eyes, though it vanished just as quickly. Rias, what about your so-called fiancé? Why are you pushing this cat onto Lynn instead? You're even using the catgirl card. Phew. Calm down. Calm down. At that moment, Lynn finally noticed her presence. Oh? What a rare guest. He smiled in slight surprise. He didn't hold any ill will toward Sana. After all, she'd helped him acquire housing and provided him with water-based magic. Even though Rias had arranged it, it was still Sana who delivered everything. This was only their second meeting since their engagement had been broken off. Lynn had assumed Sana would avoid him until everything was officially settled. But here she was, showing up on her own. Lynn was momentarily confused. Still, there was probably only one reason she came. Has the engagement cancellation been finalized? Sana's expression stiffened. Engagement cancellation, right. That. She had almost forgotten about that entirely. Ah. No, that's not. Sana seemed a bit flustered. Lynn fell silent for a moment before asking, then why are you here? Without answering, Sana silently took out several scrolls, spellbooks, and weapons. Then she placed them all in front of him. Lynn's eyelid twitched. Sana began her explanation. This is Holy Attribute Magic Chain of Redemption. Light Element Spell Photo Etching Seal. Holy Weapon Nail of the Penitent. Light Element Weapon Photon Collapse Hand Cannon. Lynn's apartment. Living room. The air was heavy with silence. Lynn stared at the pile of spells, weapons, and other items on the floor, momentarily speechless. He didn't say a word until Sana finished unloading everything. This is... well, it's compensation. Sana hesitated for a moment, then said, I heard from Rias that you've been needing items with holy and light attributes lately. Compensation. Lynn raised an eyebrow, recalling their earlier conversation. If the engagement were cancelled, he'd be compensated. But... Lynn asked with some confusion, but the engagement hasn't been cancelled yet, has it? Sana's expression stiffened, and she stammered, it's just a matter of time. All right. Lynn reluctantly accepted her reasoning. Since she insisted on giving him these, could he really refuse? Still. Lynn gave her a strange look. Did you rob the church? As soon as that was mentioned, Sana regained her calm. Adjusting her glasses, she replied matter-of-factly, it was just a small fry. Not worth mentioning. A small fry? How could there be so many small fries? Lynn's eyelid twitched. Still. He'd take it for what it was. There was no need for him to expose her. After all, he was the one benefiting. And these holy and light attribute items were just for Mahiru anyway. Would it be inappropriate to give Mahiru something Sana gave him? But then again, even Mahiru was part of his peerage. Giving things to the peerage wasn't the same as giving them away. Midori, bring Miss Sana some tea. She had brought him so much. The least she deserved was a cup of tea. Sana pursed her lips slightly. Miss Sana. Lynn used to call her by name directly. Somehow, it felt a little stifling when he was so polite. And Sana's gaze quietly drifted toward Konako still curled up in Lynn's arms. Sensing that cold stare, Konako stiffened slightly before meeting Sana's eyes. Konako. She remembered that Sana had an engagement with Lynn senpai, didn't she? So wasn't it kind of bad for her to be leaning on him like this? But she was a pet, wasn't she? Unable to withstand Sana's gaze, Konako stood up silently. Senpai, I'll head back first. Before anyone could respond, Konako activated her teleportation magic and vanished from Lynn's apartment. But, the moment she left Lynn's embrace, a dazed emptiness settled in her heart. She felt a little hollow. After Konako left, the apartment fell into silence again. Sana sipped her tea, feeling a little awkward. She had come in a hurry. But because of the cordial atmosphere when they first met, her relationship with Lynn had become a bit complicated. She didn't know what she was supposed to say. She wanted to improve their awkward dynamic. But all she could think to do was spend money. After quickly finishing her tea, Sana left. Lynn was left confused by this woman. Did she come here just to give him stuff? Was she trying to support him? Just then, a notification sound came from his phone. Rias, what did you do to Konako? QA Academy. Occult Research Club. Rias was staring at the silver-haired girl who had clearly come back, off. She couldn't help but question Lynn. In that state, it was obvious. She was in heat. Rias's expression was complicated. Lynn, could it be? Lynn, does touching her ears count? Seeing Rias's message, Lynn instantly guessed what she wanted to ask. Rias. Rias was stunned for a moment. Just that? She thought. Rias felt a bit uneasy. But, was Konako really that innocent? Just from touching her ears, she ended up like this? Still. Fortunately, things hadn't gone completely off the rails, it was still within control. Rias rubbed her forehead, feeling a headache coming on. Going forward, maybe she should ban Konako from visiting Lynn. It hadn't even been that long, and she was already showing her ears to someone else. Next time, would it be her tail? Girls really can't be kept at home once they grow up. Rias sighed like a weary mother. Ding dong. A new message alert popped up on her phone. Lynn, picture.jpg, please thank Sana for her generous gift. Lynn, Sana is so generous. Shouldn't you, Rias, also show some appreciation? Lynn was dropping hints left and right. Rias? Rias's expression turned complicated. The photo Lynn sent was filled with holy and light attribute spells and weapons. She didn't even need to think. Clearly, Sana had sent them. She had just received news not long ago. A fallen angel church in Kua town had been wiped out. No need to guess, obviously Sana's doing. A diplomatic incident. A full-on diplomatic incident. All of that, just to send some holy and light attribute spells and weapons to Lynn? Sana. Are you in too deep? This matter would definitely be reported to the Mu. Fortunately, Sana was still rational. She had only targeted the weakest faction of the three major forces. Besides, that church really did have problems. So overall, it wasn't a huge deal. But, Serafal Sama is definitely going to hear about this. Rias was a little helpless. On the other side, in a corner of Kua town, a woman who had been using magic to monitor Konako immediately noticed her abnormal condition. Konako's estrus period came early. The underworld. Leviathan's office. Sana's actions were instantly placed on Serafal's desk. She stared at the report in her hand, her expression filled with confusion. A fallen angel base in Kua town was destroyed. Sana did this. She found it hard to believe. It didn't seem like something Sana would do. But after reading through all the information, her expression turned blank. Then, she tightly gripped the papers in her hand, grinding her teeth. My Sana, she actually did this for that man. I'm not willing to accept this. Serafal's eyes were brimming with tears. Then, with a resolute expression, she said, it must be that man. That man must have threatened Sana by bringing up dissolving the engagement. Woo. Sana, you've suffered. Serafal had already been aware of Sana's move to break off the engagement. But this matter wasn't simple. It concerned the stability of the entire underworld. She and the other three Musurtsks among them were all part of the new generation of Mu. Their foundation in the underworld was still fragile. If promises weren't kept, it would only stir more unrest. Sure, they could suppress everything with sheer power, but wouldn't that make them no different from the old Mu faction? That's why. The marriage contract with the Valafor family had become a crucial means of stabilizing the underworld. Aside from her, the other three Mu took it very seriously. As a Mu, Serafal could understand that. But, we can't let Sana bear this pain alone. Serafal's eyes turned determined. This engagement had originally been her idea. For Sana's happiness. Her gaze grew distant, and it was unclear what she was thinking. A few days later. The world of Black Bullet. The fall of Tokyo sent shockwaves across the world. The global focus turned toward Tokyo. And then came the next shock. Scorpio, dead? But, how did he die? Who killed him? No one knew. Just as people were preparing to investigate, they suddenly discovered something strange. There seemed to be fewer and fewer cursed children for no reason. After Lynn reincarnated a new batch of cursed children, his power rose yet again. Then, on the map of the Black Bullet world, a cross was drawn at the location of Japan. Dash. At the same time. Shuchin Academy, guidance room. Natsuki closed her eyes, her expression filled with exhaustion. Izayama Yomi, lost contact. After hanging up the phone, she rubbed her temple. Looking for someone? That wasn't her strong suit. But... Natsuki suddenly recalled the devil flyer Lynn had given to Yomi. She wondered if Yomi had used it. Even if the cost would likely be outrageous. At least it could save her life. Given Lynn's current strength, dealing with a monster like Hago Romojitsune shouldn't be a problem. With that thought, she sent a message to Lynn. Dash. Black Bullet World. Lynn received a message from Natsuki. Izayama Yomi. He thought of the black-haired woman he had seen a few days ago, his expression turning strange. He hadn't expected the piece he had placed casually before to be activated so soon. Still. Once you cross into another world, the devil flyer's summoning can no longer be sensed. Lynn turned and left for the main world. Main world. At a shrine. Yomi and Kodoko were in a miserable state. Kodoko stared at Yomi with obvious resentment. If it weren't for this woman, she wouldn't have been forced to take such a risk. Yomi looked a little embarrassed. Sorry. I dragged you into this. She was breathing heavily, clearly exhausted. Yomi looked around with fatigue written all over her face. This had to be a fantasy space. It was the result of her discussion with Kodoko. However, even though they understood the nature of this space, there was no way for them to leave it. So, Kodoko concluded, this place is definitely connected to Hago Romojitsune. The fact that even Yomi couldn't handle it meant it had to be a powerful monster. Yomi let out a weak hum. She was so exhausted she could barely speak. Kodoko sighed. So, why not just use that life-saving flyer you got before we came here? Hearing this, Yomi hesitated. Given our current situation, if we use it, we'll definitely have to pay a steep price, right? Kodoko looked speechless. At this point, no matter how high the cost is, can it be worse than this? Even if they didn't summon the devil, they'd just be stuck here indefinitely. That was no different from dying. But Yomi was still hesitating. Kodoko couldn't take it anymore and pulled the flyer out of her pocket. Wait. Yomi was slightly stunned. But Kodoko didn't bother asking for her permission. She gave a sweet smile, then raised the devil flyer. Please help us, devil. As her voice fell, the flyer in her hand lit up brilliantly. A magic circle unfolded instantly. Lynn's figure slowly emerged. But when he saw Izayama Yomi and Iwanaga Kodoko, Lynn paused for a moment. So, who's the contractor? Her. Kodoko quickly pointed at Yomi. Lynn looked at Yomi, then glanced at the devil flyer in Kodoko's hand. Kodoko gave an awkward smile, then stuffed the flyer into Yomi's hands. Izayama Yomi. She opened her mouth, but in the end, could only sigh silently. There was no helping it. It was true that Kodoko had been dragged into this because of her. But who would have thought things would go sideways like this? Everything had gone smoothly the last few times. But this time, a flicker of emotion passed through Yomi's eyes. To think it turned out to be one of Hago Romojitsune's tales. What rotten luck! She cursed silently. Then, she met Lynn's crimson eyes. After a moment of silence, she could only nod and say, "It's me." Lynn nodded. Now it was easy to confirm the contractor. He began examining the surroundings. It was dark. Floating in the air were bronze mirrors styled after ukiyo-e from over 100 years ago. The frames of each mirror were etched with dark red spell runes. Strangely, the mirrors didn't reflect their own images. Instead, they showed historical scenes. Some showed cities engulfed in flames, others, blooming spring gardens. It seemed each mirror was a different space. Izayama Yomi reminded him, this place is strange. Each mirror reflects a battle scene. Miss Kodoko and I have already shattered 8 of them. Hearing this, Kodoko gave an embarrassed smile. In truth, it was Yomi who did all the work. All Kodoko had done was analyze their situation. She didn't expect Yomi to include her at all. Yomi continued, I suspect that to leave this place, we'll have to break all the mirrors. After she finished speaking, her expression turned slightly grim. There were still 92 mirrors remaining, and just dealing with 8 had already left her in this state. If it were just the 2 of them, there was no way they'd make it out. So, although she had hesitated before summoning the devil, now that he was here, she felt no regrets. In fact, she was already thinking about what sort of payment she'd have to offer. She'd heard devils were most interested in collecting followers. Her expression turned a little hard to read, it was unclear what she was thinking. As for whether Lynn could actually get them out of this space, anyone who could joke around with Natsuki Minamiya shouldn't be weak. Kodoko was also secretly studying the summoned devil. She couldn't help but feel. He was different from what she'd imagined. Aren't devils supposed to be creepy, ugly, and terrifying? Why was this one, handsome? And Shuchen uniform. She muttered softly. He was even wearing the same school uniform as her. Wait. Was this devil really reliable? There was clear doubt in Kodoko's eyes. After all, it was hard to be convinced by someone who still looked like a student. Alright, I get it. After Yomi's explanation, combined with his own analysis and magical scanning, Lynn had a solid grasp of the situation. In short, this was an illusion domain created by a fox spirit. If brute force was the method, he could simply blast through it with a magic explosion. That was easy enough for someone like Lynn, an ultimate class devil. If he wanted to take a more refined approach, he could break through with the slash of the Blade Devil or a strike from the Archivist Devil. So, let's talk about the payment first. Hi. Kodoko's eyes widened slightly, surprised by how direct Lynn was. Yomi, however, showed no reaction. In fact, it was more accurate to say, she felt relieved. Since Lynn said that, it meant he had complete confidence. So, the problem now was on her side. What could she offer? Yomi looked down at herself. Besides her body, she only had the treasured sword Rang Yuran. Fine. In truth, she understood that the choice wasn't really hers to make. After all, this was a commission that concerned both their lives. Yomi sighed inwardly. It felt like she had exhausted a lifetime's worth of frustration today. She steadied herself and said solemnly, if there's anything the devil desires, just take it. At the very least, she could survive. She didn't want to leave Kagura behind just yet. The thought of Kagura softened her heart slightly. Seeing this, Lynn didn't bother with pleasantries. Alright, then come and be part of my peerage. As expected. Yomi wasn't surprised. From a human perspective, she had value. Okay. Yomi nodded. Once her mind was made up, she had no intentions of regretting it. Lynn looked at her in mild surprise. He hadn't expected her to agree so easily. Instead, it was Iwanaga Kodoko who reacted loudly. Wait, what's a peerage? She blinked at Lynn with wide, innocent eyes. Lynn didn't look at her, only answered casually, basically, my harem. Harem. Kodoko was genuinely shocked this time. Even if peerage really meant harem. Did he have to say it so openly? Was this how all devils acted? She couldn't understand it at all. Even Yomi's body stiffened for a moment. Peerage, did that mean she had to fulfill the role of a wife? Though she felt a bit uncomfortable, her expression remained calm. Her eyes turned slightly dazed. So they were going to be family now? But it didn't seem that bad. She sort of liked the feeling of being accepted. Although he was a man she had only met twice. No. He should be a devil. Still. It was all too fast. She felt a little conflicted. If she really had to fulfill her duties as a wife, it would take some mental preparation. Kodoko, seeing Yomi drift into some kind of daydream, was left speechless. Lynn looked at Kodoko with a smile. What? Interested in joining my peerage too? No, no, no. Kodoko quickly waved her hands and even took a step back. Although this devil was undeniably handsome and matched her tastes, the whole harem thing was just. She forced a smile. My delicate body wouldn't survive your impact, Mr. Devil, so I'll pass. It's fine. Once you become a devil, your physical strength increases. Kodoko's expression froze, and she replied with tears in her eyes, Mr. Devil, someone like me wouldn't even fit in, would I? Lynn looked at her oddly, then said, alright, I'll stop teasing you. It's time to leave this place. Since the deal was made, there was no need to stay here any longer. Hearing that, Kodoko patted her chest and let out a breath of relief. Then she asked curiously, so, what's Mr. Devil going to do? She and Yomi had been trapped in this space for days. She knew exactly how strong Yomi was. But even someone like her had only managed to destroy 8 mirrors. What was this devil planning? Surely he'd follow the rules of the space, right? Yes. Rules. According to her deduction, this space had rules. From their battles, she had identified 2 so far. First was gaze. If you stared at a mirror too long, the scene inside would become reality, triggering a battle. The second was obsession impact. Each mirror contained a projection of its owner's obsession. After shattering the mirror, one would have to endure the emotional backlash of that obsession. That was also why Yomi couldn't hold on much longer. Her heart was already sensitive, and facing wave after wave of negative emotions had exhausted her. If it continued like this, Yomi felt like her consciousness would be drowned in countless obsessions. Kodoko relayed her findings to Lynn, a hint of worry in her voice. But Lynn simply raised his hand and said, don't worry. It'll only take a moment. Kodoko. Just as her doubts were forming, she saw a surge of powerful black magic erupt from Lin's body. The magic surged like a flame, instantly filling the entire space. Crack! Unable to withstand Lin's overwhelming magic, the illusion space let out a shattering sound. Then boom! The entire mirror space collapsed in an instant. The setting sun bathed the three of them in warm orange light. Kodoko's eyes widened, her voice trembling. He's a monster. She had never encountered a devil before, but based on the magic Lynn released, she could clearly understand just how terrifying he was through simple comparison. And didn't she just see that the moment they stepped out of the mirror space, all the monsters that had been surrounding them didn't dare come any closer? In fact, so scary. Run! It's over. The princess has been captured by the devil. The monsters were shouting things like it's over, the princess is going to be eaten, as they all fled in panic. Yes. They ran away. Kodoko's eyelids twitched, her delicate little fists clenched. These monsters were seriously unreliable. Yomi looked at Lynn in a daze. So, all you needed was magic to break through. It was clearly a crude method, but it was ridiculously effective. And monster? Hearing Kodoko's muttering, Yomi's expression turned subtle. Compared to Hago Romojitsun or even Yasaka, neither had the pressure Lynn exuded just now. Wasn't he already close to breaking through to Mu class? Yomi's usually calm face finally cracked. She took in a sharp breath. Becoming a Mu class devil's follower? It felt like a massive win. Yomi's expression turned increasingly subtle. Let's begin the reincarnation ceremony. Yomi's heart tightened slightly. But then she heard Lynn say, although I really want to say that, there's still one little bug left to handle. Little bug? Yomi and Kodoko looked confused. But soon, they heard a heavy stomping sound approaching. They turned toward the sound. And saw a massive fox radiating a golden glow appear before them. Ya-a-a-a-a-a! Ya-a-a-a-a-a! The fox devil's foul-smelling mouth let out a piercing roar. The strong gust of air blew through Yomi and Kodoko's hair. It's the tail of Hago Romojitsun. Yomi's eyes narrowed sharply. She instinctively drew her treasured sword Rang Yuran. Nu. She unsheathed the blade and called softly. A massive canine Shikigami appeared at her side. In the next instant, one woman and one Shikigami charged forward together. Boom! A swift III slash struck the fox's body, glowing with a golden halo. The recoil caused Yomi's palm to tremble slightly. But when she looked closer, Rang Yuran hadn't left even a scratch on its body. A chill ran down her spine. The Nu opened its massive jaws to bite down on the fox, but only managed to tear off a few strands of the golden aura. The giant fox lowered its gaze, glancing indifferently at Izayama Yomi, and suddenly moved its foreleg. Boom! Yomi reacted quickly, lifting Rang Yuran horizontally to block. But the immense force sent her flying backward. TCH. She clicked her tongue in annoyance. Just a tail and she couldn't even put up a fight. Even Kodoko quietly smacked her lips. Was she crazy to follow Yomi to face this kind of monster? Humph! The fox devil snorted coldly, filled with disdain. Since you're here, prepare to become my sacrifice. Its fox-like eyes shifted to focus directly on Iwanaga Kodoko. Huh? Sacrifice? Me? Kodoko was stunned. Then she quickly and shamelessly hid behind Lynn. She looked up at him with a pitiful gaze and said in a soft, pleading voice, Mr. Devil. You'll protect me, right? Lynn rubbed his chin and narrowed his eyes. Was this part of the commission? Commission? What commission content? Kodoko blinked, flustered. Did he just make that up on the spot? While she was still panicking, the fox devil's enormous head loomed over Lynn, opening its stinking mouth. Yaa! So noisy. Lynn's eyes went cold. He lazily waved his hand. A flash of white light slashed across instantly. The fox devil's roar stopped abruptly. Golden light poured from its neck like blood. Boom! Its head hit the ground, still attached by a thread of flesh. The massive body began to dissolve, disintegrating into golden motes. Only one fox tail remained. Lynn narrowed his eyes. The tail twitched and suddenly tried to flee. But Lynn casually bound it with a magic chain, yanking it back into his hand. The tail trembled violently, flailing in resistance. But Lynn didn't budge. In fact, he even stretched it taut. A shadow emerged in the distance, gazing toward Lynn. Hago Romojitsun. Lynn raised an eyebrow and spoke her name. Hago Romojitsun snorted coldly, seemingly realizing there was no way to retrieve her tail. She left behind only one sentence. Take good care of my tail. Then, wait for me to come retrieve it. As soon as she finished speaking, the shadow shattered. Lynn muttered, Hago Romojitsun. She should be in Kyoto, right? Yomi, who had rushed over, nodded. Yes. No objection from Yasaka. Lynn looked surprised. Wasn't Yasaka supposed to be the ruler of Kyoto? Yomi hesitated. We suspect the Countermeasures Bureau might be cooperating with Hago Romochitsune in Hell. So? Lynn was taken aback. Hell? As in, Hades? Lynn, this world is getting way too complicated. Hago Romochitsune was actually working with Hades? Agility, I0. Durability, I0. Magic power, I0. Inherent skills. Spiritual sense, Night Parade of 100 Demons. Sword Heart, Nameless Countercurrent. Karma Devil. Izayama Yomi. Rank, Mid-Class Devil. Race, Devil. Master, Lynn Valifor. Stats. Strength, I0. Agility, I0. Durability, I0. Magic, I0. Inherent skills. Spiritual sense, Night Parade of 100 Demons. Allows her to sense the presence of spirits and malice within range. She can also mark weaknesses on targets, doubling damage against spiritual enemies. Sword Heart, Nameless Countercurrent. By sacrificing vision, fighting with eyes closed, hearing and spiritual perception are significantly enhanced, entering a state known as Mind's Eye. In this state, physical attacks gain spiritual penetration and can anticipate enemy movements. Karma Devil. Flame of Karma. All attacks accumulate karma. Each time a target kills, betrays, or deceives, the sins manifest as black flames that ignite from their body. The intensity of the flames depends on the depth of their sins. Devil Transformation, Karma Burning Mode. Karma Flame? Lynn raised a finger, and whoosh, a jet of black flame ignited. The fire of sin. He carefully examined the mechanics of the flame. It turned out to be a type of flame whose intensity is based on accumulated karma. In other words, the greater the karma of the target, the stronger the flame would burn. A pretty interesting type of fire. He copied the blessings information and handed it to Yomi. The Devil of Karma. Yomi changed back into her uniform while reading the blessings information. This really does seem suited to my abilities. She drew her treasured sword, Rang Yuran, and whoosh, black flames wrapped around the blade out of nowhere. Yomi studied it closely. It doesn't seem to have any temperature. She was a bit surprised. Apparently, karma itself served as the fuel for the flames she controlled. The deeper the karma, the more fiercely it would burn. After examining it for a while, Yomi looked up at Lynn and asked respectfully. Master Lynn, what are your instructions next? Now reincarnated as part of Lynn's peerage, Yomi was clearly more respectful toward him. Whether it was the benefits of becoming a devil or the advantages of the blessings system, it was undeniably a rare opportunity. But was she going to be asked to sleep with him? Yomi appeared calm, but her heart was slightly uneasy. Lynn quietly observed Yomi, thinking about how best to arrange things for her. Then he thought of Hago Romochitsune. He touched the soft, warm tail that trembled occasionally. Lynn narrowed his eyes. Was this tail still connected to Hago Romochitsune somehow? But that earlier phantom. Wasn't that Yamabuki Otome? You'll stay in Kyoto for now. After some consideration, Lynn decided to keep Yomi stationed in Kyoto. First, she could collect intel locally. Second, it would allow his peerage's influence to extend into Kyoto. Third. Lynn narrowed his eyes at the foxtail still in his hand. Wait for you to come retrieve it. He wasn't exactly planning to wait for Hago Romochitsune. Yes. Yomi replied without hesitation. Mainly because she wasn't being asked to do anything intimate, she felt a strange mix of emotions. Relief? Gratitude? She wasn't sure herself. Yomi left Lynn's apartment with complicated feelings. Before she left, Lynn handed her a skillbook for teleportation magic. As a prodigy from a demon-hunting family, Yomi's learning ability was naturally high. With teleportation magic, she could also cross worlds to farm experience. However, now that Yomi had become a devil, could she still work at the Bureau? Lynn didn't think her devil identity could be hidden from the Bureau. Even though this world didn't have many powerful humans, humans shouldn't be underestimated. Being able to distinguish between devils and humans shouldn't be too difficult. Lynn considered it, then decided to message Natsuki Minamiya for compensation. After all, he did save one of her department members. Natsuki Minamiya? After reading Lynn's message, Natsuki's face darkened like the bottom of a pot. Natsuki Minamiya, is Izayama Yomi not your peerage member now? Lynn, she is. Lynn, but when you sent the request, she wasn't. Lynn, totally different situations. Natsuki Minamiya. Reading his matter-of-fact tone, Natsuki was speechless. This devil is shameless. Still, she was too lazy to argue about it. If Lynn wanted it, she'd just give it to him. It wasn't worth fussing over. Natsuki Minamiya, what do you want? Lynn rubbed his chin and thought of Hana. So far, her fighting style was just wrapping flames around her fists and swinging. What a waste of potential. He immediately made a decision. To him, every special devil in his peerage was worth cultivating. Not only did special devils provide greater feedback, their potential was also monstrous. Ordinary devils had low potential, lacked unique abilities, and gave less feedback in return. So naturally, Lynn placed more value on special devils. A flame teacher for the peerage's special devils? As she read his request, a figure came to Natsuki's mind. Well, time to toss another burden her way. Natsuki agreed without hesitation. As for whether Yomi could still work in the bureau, Natsuki answered without even thinking. Don't worry. They won't give up on someone as useful as Izayama Yomi. She clearly understood the human world far better. Not to mention becoming a devil's peerage member, even some special grade cursed spirits weren't rejected. Humans were desperately lacking in manpower. But Natsuki Minamiya, however, anything directly tied to human authority, she won't be allowed to access. Lynn didn't mind. As long as she could provide intel about potential peerage members, that was enough. As a devil, he had no interest in human politics. In fact, most non-human races didn't care about humans. Unless it involved artifact users, most weren't worth their attention. Such was the world. A harsh reality for humanity. Humans were not the protagonists of this world. At the same time, just after Yukino returned home, the doorbell rang. Yukino, your sister would like to have a little chat. Yukinashita Harano smiled sweetly and blinked at her. Yukino was silent for a moment, then quietly stepped aside to let her in. Living room. Harano took a sip of water, then smiled. Yukino's been acting a little strange lately. She leaned in slightly and teased, did you really use your sister's money to keep a man? Yukino's expression was calm. Drop the act. You already know where the money went. From the moment she asked for it, she knew Harano would investigate. What surprised her was that it took so long for her to bring it up. Harano had indeed struggled. She tried visiting the Supernatural Investigation Club multiple times but was blocked each time. That Lynn was hard to catch. The more she thought about it, the more frustrated she became. And helpless. Though she had some influence in human society, when it came to the supernatural, she was powerless. Unable to uncover the truth behind the Supernatural Investigation Club, she couldn't act recklessly. One wrong move and it could bring disaster upon their family and Yukino. But it might already be too late for Yukino. Harano sighed internally, doing her best to hide her unease. She rubbed her forehead and muttered playfully, Yukino, you're still so unlovable. Yukino's gaze was steady. If you've got something to say, just say it. Harano. Still so blunt. She rubbed her temples, the smile fading from her face, her tone turning serious. Harano decided to lay her cards on the table. Yukino, you've gotten involved in supernatural matters. Her tone was firm. Her eyes locked on Yukino's without wavering. Yukino froze then understood. So that's why she waited this long. She must have investigated more deeply. Faced with Harano's statement, Yukino hesitated. She wasn't sure how much her sister actually knew. But there was no hiding it anymore, was there? She spoke with a resigned sigh. Yet. Harano paused. Her tone turned heavy. I knew it. Honestly, even though she'd believed Shizuka's warning. Anyone who hadn't seen the supernatural firsthand would still harbor doubts. But now, Yukino had confirmed it. She would never lie about something like this. Harano took a deep breath. Since Yukino was involved, she couldn't sit on the sidelines. Harano looked straight into her sister's eyes, dead serious. Yukino, I'll help you. She didn't know what Yukino was going through, but she was sure Yukino needed support. As her sister, she had to take responsibility. Yukino was stunned. Her feelings were a little mixed but also touched. Sister. But this was her burden to bear. She couldn't let anyone else get dragged into it. She shook her head and replied firmly, it's all right, sis. I've got this. Harano was taken aback. You've got this? She fell into thought, then asked. The Supernatural Investigation Club. Yukino pursed her lips, staying silent. Harano gave her a look like, I knew it. After all, whether it was her or Yukino, their only contact with the supernatural was through the Supernatural Investigation Club at Shuchen. So, you're relying on them to solve your problem. Harano pressed on. The last time you handed them 5 million, it was for a similar issue, right? So, they take supernatural commissions. She was guessing but not wildly. Yukino didn't respond. Seeing that, Harano sighed, then asked. By the way, what exactly is the problem you're facing? She knew it involved the supernatural but still didn't know the details. At her question, Yukino suddenly trembled, overwhelmed with emotion. Don't ask me that, sis. Don't make me say it. That I can see them. Yukino forced herself to stay calm and glanced out the window. Outside, a cursed spirit with a split mouth was staring right at her. Cold sweat broke out across her entire body. In the end, Harano left with lingering doubts and concern. She then called Shizuka. Yukino really has such a difficult personality. She shook her head helplessly. For some things, acting on your own is fine. But when it comes to your own safety, shouldn't you at least tell your family and ask for help? Ah. But even if Yukino refuses to say anything, I have other ways to find out. Her insider at Shujin will report everything to her. That's right you, Shizuka. Hiratsuka Shizuka, hi. After hanging up the phone, Shizuka was speechless. So your sister's life matters, but your best friend's doesn't? I really don't want to get involved in the supernatural. Sure, she used to fantasize about being the heroine in a hot-blooded manga, but actually encountering supernatural events? No thanks. Still, just keeping an eye on Yukino's movements should be fine, right? She hesitated but eventually made up her mind. Yukino was her student, after all. As a sensei, helping her students solve problems was her duty. The next day, Kyoto. Just as naturally as ever, Yomi returned to the bureau. She didn't think there was anything strange about entering as a devil. But her superior clearly thought otherwise. Jingyuji Ayam stared at Yomi with a complicated expression and a heavy heart. She had already heard the news from Natsuki Minamiya the day before. She knew what had happened, though at first, she couldn't believe it. But now, Yomi had really become a devil band come back to her. Jingyuji Ayam rubbed her temples, feeling a dull ache in her chest. Her favorite officer had gone out on a mission and come back, as part of a devil's peerage? Though it wasn't exactly her fault. After all, just facing a being like Hagio Romochitsune. Even if it was just a tale. They were lucky to make it back alive. Still, she couldn't accept it. Another promising human taken by a devil. Jingyuji Ayam was furious. Ever since devils gained the ability to reincarnate other races using evil pieces, the already scarce pool of human talent had grown even smaller. And what's worse? The devils not only welcomed new peerage members openly, they even charged for it. Seriously. It was outrageous. At the root of it all. This was that damned Gap Witch's fault. She asked her to help find someone, and she summoned a devil? Well, Yomi summoned him herself. Can't blame her too much. Survival comes first. Jingyuji Ayam didn't blame Yomi but she did have a headache. What are your plans going forward? Yomi blinked in confusion. What I was doing before. I'll just keep doing it. Jingyuji Ayam. Your devil master didn't give you any specific instructions. He said to just do what I normally do. Alright then. Jingyuji Ayam was thoroughly confused. What did this devil mean? Infiltrating human institutions with his peerage members? What was his goal? But there was no real way to refuse. Yomi had always been a useful asset and now, as a devil, she was likely even more powerful. She was tempted. Even witches who'd signed contracts with devils were still in service. So being a peerage member shouldn't be a big deal. Alright. Jingyuji Ayam agreed decisively. But, it'll be hard to explain to your family, right? At this, Yomi paused for a moment. It doesn't matter. They're not important. Afternoon. Yukino took a deep breath, standing in front of the door to the Supernatural Investigation Club. She had sat alone in her classroom until 5 in the afternoon, struggling with her thoughts. And now, she had finally made up her mind. She was going to sell herself. From last night to now, she had realized something after all the internal conflict and hesitation. True strength is admitting your own weakness. In the past, she'd always prided herself on being strong. But she had been blind to her fragility. The old school building incident had ripped that illusion away. She knew her limits but still refused to acknowledge them. She forced herself to confront danger, forced herself not to rely on others. But now, she was finally ready to admit it. True strength was the courage to accept her weakness. Phew. Goodbye, to the cowardly me. With resolve in her eyes, Yukino opened the door to the Supernatural Investigation Club without even checking the situation inside. She bowed and declared loudly. President Lynn. Please let me join. Yukino had gathered all her courage to shout those words that had weighed on her heart. But silence. A long silence. Beads of sweat began forming on her forehead. Why no response? Was she not sincere enough? Or was she not even qualified to join Lynn's peerage? Or maybe Lynn simply didn't want her? Yukino's thoughts spiraled into panic. For the first time, she realized. What if Lynn didn't accept her? She had been struggling over whether to become his peerage member. But she never considered. Would Lynn even want her? Why would he? Just because she was cute? Okay. She had thought that way before. But now. A growing anxiety surged in her heart. It wasn't that Lynn needed her. It was she who needed Lynn. Cute? Weren't all of Lynn's peerage members cute? Weren't they all beautiful girls? Besides. She lowered her gaze. Even her body was no longer whole. Is that Yuki Nashida? What's she doing? Voices in the hallway snapped Yukino out of her spiraling thoughts. She stood up abruptly and looked inside. Empty. The Supernatural Investigation Club was empty. Seeing this, she exhaled in relief, but her legs gave out slightly, and she leaned on the doorframe for support. It really is Yukino. Yukino turned her head stiffly and saw Yui approaching with a blonde, busty girl. Yukino, you. Yui's expression was complicated. She said just yesterday she wouldn't join the Supernatural Investigation Club. So what was she doing at its door now? Yukino felt awkward under Yui's gaze. It really is Yukino. The blonde girl looked amazed. It was the first time she'd seen Yukino in this state. Total headline material. Yukino turned away coldly. Miura Yumiko. Her expression remained blank, emotionless. She didn't care about being seen in an embarrassing situation. But Yui's eyes made her feel a little uncomfortable. I've got something to do. I'll leave now. Yukino turned away and left immediately. Wait, Yukino. Yui instinctively reached out. Miura Yumiko was surprised and quickly said. Yui, didn't you say you were going to join? Before she could finish, Yui rushed back and covered her mouth. Yukino paused, turned around, and looked quietly at Yui. Feeling Yukino's gaze, Yui froze for a moment. Then turned to face her. Didn't we agree? They fell into silence for a moment. Yukino, can we talk? Okay. Yukino nodded softly. Wait. Miura Yumiko stepped forward with a sour expression. Yui, you're abandoning me now. Yui froze. Yumiko, it's hard to explain what comes next, so. Could you stop following me? She didn't say that part. Miura Yumiko scoffed in frustration, unwilling to back down. I want to see what's so mysterious. Yui sighed deeply. Yukino glanced at her and gave a light warning. We won't be responsible for what happens next. TCH, who needs your protection? But the more they tried to hide it, the more curious she got. What the hell was going on? Faculty Guidance Office. Natsuki Minamiya sat in a chair, holding a folding fan, looking at Hana with suspicion. This is the peerage member you said can use aura, life flame. She looked like an ordinary student. And as a teacher at Shuchen, could there really be a talent hidden from her eyes? What? You don't believe me? Natsuki didn't reply, but her expression clearly said it all. Wanna bet? If I win, you become my peerage member. Natsuki's face darkened instantly. You perverted freak. I swear I'll have you arrested one day. Is Natsuki-chan going to join Master's peerage, too? Hana looked shocked. Smack. The folding fan slammed down on Hana's head. Ow. Don't call your sensei by name and don't add Chan. Putting the fan away, Natsuki glared at her. And who said I agreed to become part of his peerage? Hana rubbed her head and mumbled. Everyone targeted by Master eventually becomes. Natsuki-chan won't escape either. Thanks to her interruption, the bet was dropped. But Natsuki had no intention of betting with Lynn. Let's go. I'll take you to that idiot. Shuchen Academy, schoolyard. Misaki Sasaki watched as Natsuki led two devils toward her, her face full of helplessness. So, you just sold me off to devils like that? Natsuki replied calmly, what do you mean sold? That sounds terrible. This is a legitimate job. You're being hired as a teacher for devils. Misaki blinked, her eyes lighting up with hope. Does that come with a teaching fee? Natsuki remained calm. You could try applying for one, or... She pointed her folding fan in Lynn's direction and added, you could ask them for it. Misaki's mouth twitched. Ask the devils? She glanced at Lynn, who looked gentle on the surface, and couldn't help but shudder. Just standing there, he exuded overwhelming pressure. A powerhouse. Definitely someone incredibly strong. Asking someone like that for a teaching fee? Wouldn't that be suicide? Misaki slumped, looking defeated. Natsuki tried to comfort her. Don't look so down. When we meet again in the future, they'll probably be calling you Devil Instructor. Cheer up a little. Misaki rolled her eyes. Oh, thank you so much. You're welcome. Natsuki opened her folding fan and subtly hid her mouth behind it, lips curling up. This idiot's expression was rare to see. Ahem. Misaki cleared her throat, putting on a brave face with effort. Alright, if it's come to this, let's start with some punches. She placed her hands firmly on Hana's shoulders and shouted, are you ready, Yurikawa-san? Ah, yes. Startled by Misaki's sudden enthusiasm, Hana reflexively straightened up. Misaki nodded with satisfaction and began sizing her up. Oh, what a great build. Definitely a physique well suited for martial arts training. Hana blushed from her touch but then suddenly remembered something. Ah! Speaking of which. Natsuki ch. Hana caught a warning glare and immediately changed the subject. Aren't Natsuki-sensei and Sasazaka-sensei not ordinary humans? Did you just now realize that? Lynn, Natsuki and Misaki all had the same thought simultaneously. After inspecting Hana's body, Misaki nodded. Not bad. Now, let me see your aura abilities. As a PE sensei at Shuchin Academy, Misaki had a decent impression of Hana. Well, anyone would remember a student who ate while running laps during PE class, right? She remembered this exceptionally food-loving student clearly. Never imagined they'd meet again like this and that she'd be a devil. Misaki felt a bit emotional. But Hana, who was just a regular student before, could now use aura, life flame? Misaki was skeptical. Natsuki had doubts too, which was why she personally accompanied Lynn. Otherwise, Lynn could have just gone to the schoolyard to find Misaki himself. That said, Natsuki knew Lynn wouldn't joke around about something like this. But to say Hana had already mastered aura manipulation? That was hard to believe. If Hana hadn't been a Shuchin student, she wouldn't have reacted so strongly. After all, she'd been right under her nose this whole time. And besides, Hana hadn't been part of Lynn's peerage for long. She recalled the day Hana joined the Supernatural Investigation Club. It must have been then. After receiving Lynn's message yesterday, Natsuki had done her own investigation. Before becoming a devil, Hana was just a normal girl. So in such a short time. Natsuki narrowed her eyes and carefully scrutinized Hana. Lynn noticed and smiled faintly. Hana, show them something interesting. Hana's expression turned serious, and she immediately activated the life energy inside her. Whoosh! In the next moment, golden aura surged out, enveloping her entire body. She looked like a superhuman. Misaki's eyes widened in shock. The quality of this aura is insane. Natsuki narrowed her eyes. There was no doubt about it, Hana had truly mastered aura usage. And even more surprising, the quality of this aura. She shifted her gaze to Lynn and frowned slightly. Muttering under her breath, she said, just how did this guy do it? She had a feeling Hana's transformation was definitely tied to Lynn. Now that she thought about it, was it possible Lynn wasn't just randomly recruiting people into his peerage at Shuchin Academy? She looked genuinely surprised. Before, she thought that polling in ordinary students was meaningless. But now, that assumption was completely shattered. Just judging from Hana's aura quality alone, she was definitely a top-tier talent among humans. However, she was a devil now. Tisk. If Lynn wasn't recruiting people at random, did Yuta and the others also have hidden potential? She fell deep into thought. If that was true, then what did it mean that she hadn't noticed any of this? And also, did Shuchin Academy have so many hidden talents? And they were all recruited by Lynn, a devil? Compared to that, Natsuki would have preferred if Lynn was just acting on impulse. Meanwhile, Misaki stared at Hana with a complicated expression. She was definitely a student that suited her teaching style. But now, she was a devil. Still. Misaki took a deep breath. If this was how it was going to be, then the devil instructor was officially online. Misaki's expression turned serious. Throw a couple of punches at random. Hana nodded, her face full of determination. Ha! Yeah! Misaki. Watching Hana's awkward movements, Misaki was speechless. Yep, those were some seriously wild punches. Hana and Misaki's training gradually got on track. Lynn and Natsuki watched for a while before walking away. On the road, Natsuki said in a complicated tone, so you're actually not just polling people at random. Just Hana alone was enough to overturn her entire impression of Lynn running some kind of harem at Shuchin. Lynn spread his hands. I'm a very career-focused devil. Of course, the harem part was real too. But there was no need to tell Natsuki that. Natsuki hesitated. So, do Yuta and the others also have some sort of talent? Lynn smiled. Do you want to know? Seeing his expression, Natsuki deadpanned, no I don't. This guy was probably about to say something about joining his peerage again. Shuchin Academy, at a bench. Yukino and two others sat together. Hi. Yumiko looked confused. What are you guys even talking about? Supernatural, harem clubs? Chuyunibio. Yumiko frowned and placed her hand on Yui's forehead. Yui, you've gotten so weird lately. You must have been infected by her. I knew that service club was suspicious. Ahaha. Yui looked embarrassed and quickly waved her hands. No, that's not it, Yumiko. She didn't know how to explain it. Yukino said expressionlessly, Uegahama-san, there's no point trying to reason with a single zealot organism. Huh? Wanna fight? Alright, Yui was stuck between them, looking stressed. After all that, Yumiko frowned. So basically, the president of that supernatural investigation club is openly running a harem on campus. Ah! She had completely filtered out the supernatural part. She still thought they were just being delusional, right? Since you guys are saying that, I'll just go expose him. Wait. Don't. Yukino and Yui both looked horrified and quickly stopped her. Yumiko frowned suspiciously. You guys, were you threatened by that supernatural investigation club? In any case, you don't need to worry about it. Yukino frowned coldly, her tone sharp. She didn't want outsiders misunderstanding Lynn. Please, please. Yui put her hands together like she was begging. Yumiko clicked her tongue in frustration but silently made a note of this. Supernatural Investigation Club, hi. Dash. At the same time, at Fallen Angel headquarters. News from Kua town had just arrived. A branch was destroyed. They seriously reported something this minor. Azazel ruffled his messy hair, sounding irritated. Was something this small going to interrupt his sacred gear research? Just send someone to get revenge. Problem solved. Yes, sir. The fallen angel who was reporting to him bowed and turned to leave. Wait. Azazel suddenly stopped him. He opened his eyes and carefully read the report again. The word Sirafal immediately caught his attention. Of course, he didn't care about the Citri family. But he did care about that woman from the Citri family. Sirafal. Tisk. Forget it, I'll go talk to her. Yes, sir. Meanwhile, another high-ranking fallen angel, upon hearing the report, had a dangerous, crazed glint in his eyes. A branch was destroyed. This is a big deal. Big enough to spark a war between the three factions, Your Excellency. The next day. Afternoon, at the entrance of the Supernatural Investigation Club. Yukino was here once again. Afraid of what happened yesterday, she had come straight after class ended. Yui came along with her. That's right. The two of them had a heart-to-heart yesterday. Yui didn't think that her current situation was Yukino's fault. After all, she had been the one to insist on joining in the first place, so naturally, she couldn't blame anyone else. Besides, this was something she needed to resolve herself. She couldn't keep relying on Yukino every time she was in danger. Agility, I0. Endurance, I0. Magic, I0. Unique skill. Harmonizer. When multiple teammates are present, automatically generates a bond barrier based on the level of trust between team members. Yukino Yukinashita. Race, Devil. Class, Low-Class Devil. Peerage, Lynn Valifor. Strength, I0. Agility, I0. Endurance, I0. Magic, I0. Unique skills. Solitary Wall of Reason. Temporarily increases all stats by 30%, doubles magic purity. Nullifies enemy illusion and deception type abilities. 50% of damage taken is converted into magic consumption. Snow Devil. Ice and snow-based powers. Frozen Tundra Rose, defense increases with injury severity. Devil Transformation, Hymn of the Icebound Mirror World. Supernatural Investigation Club. Lynn gazed at the blessing information displayed on Yukino and Yui's backs. As expected, they were both low-class devils. However, his eyes lingered on Yukino Yukinashita's panel. Another special type devil. Agility, I0. Endurance, I0. Magic, I0. Unique skill. Embodiment of strategic schemes. Tactical simulation, enhances team execution during combat based on available information and weak point analysis. Weapon resonance, enhances self-developed weapons using magic power and grants veranium corrosion effects to teammates' weapons for effective attacks on Gastria. Muroto Sumire. Class, Low-Class Devil. Race, Devil. Peerage, Lynn Valifor. Strength, I0. Agility, I0. Endurance, I0. Magic, I0. Unique skill. Deep Dark Wisdom. Pathogen analysis, upon contact with enemy blood or tissue, instantly identifies weaknesses and grants the team Gastria corrosion resistance. Forbidden Therapy, injects a custom serum to remove all abnormal status effects from a target at the cost of the user's vitality. If used on Gastria, causes confusion. Although neither was a special devil, their unique skills were highly specialized. They were valuable support-type talents. Perfect for commanding the Cursed Children Army. As usual, Lynn gave them Gastria factor enhancements. Lynn said, "That's all." After handing them their blessing data, he didn't say anything more. If they had questions, they could consult other peerage members. Once Lynn left, Shiba Mayori and Muroto Sumire both let out a deep sigh of relief. The world had changed too fast, and too drastically. Everything felt unfamiliar and overwhelming. Especially the fact that they'd been forcibly brought to, well, a devil's headquarters? They gently flapped the new wings on their backs, feeling an odd sense of unreality. Elsewhere. Lynn found a quiet spot. He opened his personal panel. Lynn Valifor. Race, Devil. Level, Satan Class Devil. Authority, None. Peerage, Kashuma Jayaka Utah, Yatsuya Maiko, Busujima Psycho. Skills, Evil Pieces, Devil Summoning, Archivist Devil, Summoning Devil, Blade Devil. Lynn stared at the level section on his personal panel and let out a sigh. Finally. Satan Class. He clenched his fist, feeling the explosive power coursing through his body. Back when he was still an ultimate class devil, his aura control had been lacking. But now, he could manipulate it at will. His control over demonic energy had become far more precise. Lynn had the sense that, with just a flick of his fingers, he could level an entire street. As for the true limits of his current strength, those would require further testing. Then he looked over at his skills. Evil Piece had remained unchanged. Lynn guessed it was likely related to the number and quality of special devils in his peerage. The only skill that had undergone a change was Devil's Summoning. Lynn tapped on the Devil's Summoning skill and carefully examined it. Devil's Summoning. Invasion Progress, High School of the Dead, 86.29%, Black Bullet, 56.73%. Invasion Modes, Contract Descent, Forced Invasion. Lynn raised an eyebrow. The worlds currently under his peerage's control were all displayed in this skill. Moreover, 86.29% and 56.73%? What did those numbers mean? World exploration rate? Or world control rate? Lynn couldn't tell just yet. However, he only needed to push them to 100%. Whether it was High School of the Dead or Black Bullet, they were already his peerage's back garden. No matter what those values represented, reaching full completion was only a matter of time. Lynn looked further down. Contract Descent. This seemed to be the method he had previously used to descend into the High School of the Dead and Black Bullet worlds, by establishing contracts with others. But now, Forced Invasion, hi. Lynn chuckled, a dark glint in his eyes. Now this, is how a devil should invade. Forced Invasion was far more direct. He was already looking forward to his next world. Devil's Summoning, find me a new world. After wrapping up his gains, Lynn was approached by Kisara. Lord Lynn, the legacy of the 7 stars you requested. Kisara carried a stack of boxes and placed them before Lynn. While conquering the world, Lynn naturally hadn't forgotten about the zodiac gastria. After all, they were deeply tied to his skill development. But it wasn't realistic to search the entire world for the zodiac themselves. That's where the legacy of the 7 stars became critical. Lynn glanced over them, 12 in total. Even though he had already obtained Scorpio, he still had Kisara bring that one over as well. Master. Stella's phantom suddenly materialized and leaned onto Lynn's shoulder, her voice sweet and gaze locked eagerly onto the legacy of the 7 stars. Lynn raised an eyebrow. These are useful to you? Yes, yes. Stella nodded furiously, her eyes filled with anticipation. Lynn paused for a moment, then picked up the Scorpio legacy. To be honest, he was also curious about what was inside. Click. He opened the box. Inside was a metal container adorned with intricate carvings. Lynn narrowed his eyes. The item itself didn't appear unusual. But it radiated Stella's aura. Lynn asked with surprise, is there a trace of your soul inside? His ability made him especially sensitive to such things. Yes, yes. Stella kept nodding, eager to grab it though she held back, awaiting his permission. With her confirmation, Lynn immediately understood why the zodiac gastria had been so desperate to retrieve the legacy of the 7 stars. Without them, they were incomplete. After thinking for a moment, Lynn handed the Scorpio legacy over to her. Yay! Master is the best. Clutching her legacy, Stella rubbed affectionately against Lynn before grabbing the metal container carved with the scorpion emblem. Lynn observed for a bit. Seeing no immediate change, he asked, if I recall, there aren't 12 zodiac gastria anymore, right? Stella paused, and her expression turned sorrowful. She said softly, yes. Taurus and Virgo were killed by humans. Lynn understood. He had never asked about Scorpio's past. Since she never brought it up either, it was likely not a pleasant story. Naturally, Lynn had no interest in digging up old wounds. However, he still needed the full set of zodiac gastria. As if sensing his thoughts, Stella quickly spoke. Don't worry, Master. As long as the legacy of the 7 stars are intact, there's no problem. What do you mean? Lynn looked surprised. It's all thanks to your space. After her explanation, Lynn finally understood. Each legacies contained a trace of the zodiac gastria's soul. As long as the container was placed into the space of the evil piece system and aligned with their constellation, they could be reborn. I see. Lynn finally relaxed. In that case, there's no time to waste. Zodiac gastria recovery plan begin. Originally, Lynn had planned to hand the legacies to Psycho and the others to help them level up. But since all the Zodiac Gastria were cursed children and contributed to his skills, there was no need for them to be tormented again. Especially considering how much Scorpio had whined when he forcefully stuffed her in. She'd complained for days, nearly making his ears fall off. This time, with Stella helping to mediate, the process should go smoothly. Lynn didn't hesitate and opened all the legacy of the 7 stars at once. In the next moment, the entire world trembled. 8 massive stage V Gastria began converging on Tokyo. Fortunately, Lynn had already asked Kisara to notify the rest of the peerage in advance. Psycho and the others were prepared. Still, it's quite a spectacle, Psycho said calmly as she observed the scene. Elsewhere, Lynn frowned. One is missing. Ah. Stella giggled. Cancer's a little special. Half a day later, Lynn finally came face to face with the Zodiac Gastria after their mutual convergence. He stood in the center of their gathering without the slightest trace of tension, casually observing their appearances. That was the kind of confidence his power allowed. Even if all of them attacked at once, only the Zodiac Gastria would die. The Gastria, on the other hand, didn't dare act rashly upon seeing him. A heavy silence filled the air. To be honest, even the Zodiac Gastria had never gathered like this before. None of them knew how to proceed. Besides, this human in front of them, was he even human? Just as both sides stood silently, Stella's phantom waved at them. Hello, everyone. At the sight of Stella, the Zodiac Gastria grew restless. Yeah. It was Stella. Clearly, they knew her. With Stella's explanation, the Zodiac Gastria finally understood the situation. Their gazes toward Lynn shifted, burning with excitement. They were all eager to try to discard their monstrous forms and return to something resembling humanity. Even if not quite human, it was still infinitely better. And human civilization in this world was already doomed. Their need for revenge was gone. With nothing left to lose, the idea of starting over was more than tempting. I see. Suddenly, a cool voice rang out. Stella turned her head, unsurprised. You came, Luna. Lynn also looked over. A small figure, no taller than Stella, stepped out of the shadows. She had light blue jellyfish-like hair that faded to pearl white at the tips, a glowing moon-shaped hairpin, and wore a fluffy, lacy dress with a crab embroidered on it. A shell-shaped backpack rested on her shoulder. This was Cancer. Lynn had sensed someone hidden beneath the cover of the other Gastria earlier. But he hadn't exposed her. Now, taking a closer look, he understood why Stella had said she was special. She was completely in human form. Reverting from Gastria back to a human-like body? This Cancer might have been the strongest among the Zodiac Gastria. More than that, she may have been hiding among humans all this time. How about it, Luna? Want to join us? Stella offered warmly. Luna was quiet for a moment. Now that she understood everything, she also knew Lynn had been the one to destroy humanity. And honestly, that was amazing. He not only completed their revenge, but even resurrected Taurus and Virgo. She felt an unexpected warmth in her heart. Besides, Luna glanced at Stella again. That sweet smile. Luna silently made her decision. They would never betray someone Stella trusted. As beings who had suffered the same fate, their trust in each other was absolute. So, Luna's lips curled into a smile. Why not? This big brother who wiped out humanity, he's totally my type. With Luna's agreement, the rest of the Zodiac Gastria responded as well. With Stella's assistance, their massive bodies dissolved into dust, leaving behind only spiritual remnants. Each one was absorbed into Lynn's evil peace system. I'm Evelyn. Nice to meet you. Tess. One by one, the Zodiac Gastria announced their names. When Luna of Cancer entered as the last, 10 constellations were now stored within the evil peace space. Lynn stroked his chin, feeling like the process had gone far too smoothly. They were a little too easy to deceive. They trusted him that easily. Still, Lynn had no plans to betray that trust. Back at the peerage's residence, Lynn returned the legacy of the 7 stars to each of them. The moment he did, cheers erupted throughout the evil peace space. Seeing their joy, Lynn couldn't help but smile as well. Then, he tossed the legacies of Taurus and Virgo into the starry sky. The 2 missing zodiac were restored to their places. Inside the evil peace space, the Zodiac Gastria now floated in their respective positions, arranged neatly like stars. However, Lynn frowned slightly. Taurus and Virgo are a bit dim. There's nothing that can be done. Stella's voice was tinged with sadness. Lynn gently patted her head in comfort. Then he looked at the panel. Apoptosis genome. The skill was finally complete. Apoptosis genome. Factor collection, acquired, mole factor, hedgehog factor. Factor fusion, dual factor integration. Factor assimilation, can parasitize other life forms and implant the apoptosis strain, turning them into puppets controlled by the host. Zodiac pilgrimage, Scorpio, Cancer. Taurus missing, Virgo missing. Lynn focused on the final ability listed under apoptosis genome. Zodiac pilgrimage. Looking at the effect, Lynn felt this ability could easily stand alone as its own skill. Having it buried within apoptosis genome almost seemed like a waste. This ability was divided into 4 stages. Spring pilgrimage, summer pilgrimage, autumn pilgrimage, and winter pilgrimage. Currently, with his level of power, Lynn could only access the first stage spring pilgrimage. The spring pilgrimage came with 3 abilities. Aries crown. Summons Aries starlight to wrap the body, granting explosive speed and flame-based attacks. Taurus giant gate. Summons a massive gate engraved with the Taurus totem, capable of enduring physical attacks and reflecting part of the damage as shockwaves. Gemini mirror image. Summons a phantom clone that mirrors the user's movements and shares sensory input, though it has no offensive capabilities. If destroyed or dispelled, the user can teleport to the clone's location for a surprise strike. Seeing the effects of the spring pilgrimage, Lynn clicked his tongue in appreciation. He found an open space to begin testing his new abilities. First, Aries crown. Lynn activated the ability and with a whoosh, flames imbued with starlight instantly wrapped around his body. Huff. Lynn exhaled lightly, examining the starlight coating his form. No burning sensation. Good. That meant it wouldn't damage him. He rubbed the Aries starlight between his fingers, like stardust slipping through his hands. There was an undeniable beauty to it. Even just looking at it radiated a sense of mystery and power. Now, time to test its speed enhancement. With a thought. Whoosh. The starlight flared. He stepped forward. Buzz. In an instant, like cutting through space, Lynn vanished with a burst of starlight. It was as though a streak of light had flashed across the sky. 1 second later, dozens of kilometers from the familiar base, the starlight faded, and Lynn appeared, slightly out of breath. With the Aries crown, his speed was almost at the speed of light. But, with his current strength, it was only approaching that threshold. And he hadn't gone all out. Also, maintaining this acceleration state doesn't last long. Lynn frowned slightly, but relaxed soon after. Even if it couldn't be sustained for long, it was more than enough. Aries crown was strong. And it wasn't just a speed boost. Starlight is still flame-based, after all. I'll need to test its burning effects sometime soon. Deactivating Aries crown, Lynn moved on to the next test, Taurus giant gate. From the description, it was clearly a defensive ability. But, a minute later, Lynn stared at the unresponsive Taurus gate and felt a bit speechless. Forget it. Next. Gemini mirror image. Buzz. A shimmering mirror appeared in front of him, and an exact duplicate stepped out. Lynn carefully observed the clone. Looks identical enough. He reached toward it, but his hand passed right through. As expected, just a phantom. And it seemed like it required direct consciousness to control. Compared to Aries crown, it definitely feels weaker. Lynn had the clone move roughly a kilometer away. Then he cancelled the phantom. Buzz. Suddenly, a strange feeling surfaced in his mind. A clear spatial link between him and the clone remained, he could teleport there. Without hesitation, Lynn activated it. In a flash, he appeared at the location where the phantom had stood. Rubbing his chin, he commented, "It's not particularly strong, but it's still useful." Spring pilgrimage. There were still summer, autumn, and winter pilgrimages to unlock. Though his current power wasn't enough, just reading the descriptions was enough to know. Zodiac pilgrimage was incredibly powerful. And Lynn glanced at the Zodiac cursed children playing in the evil peace space. Each one had her own palace in the constellations uniquely designed, with its own traits. Not only that. Just like Lynn had obtained the Zodiac pilgrimage, the Zodiac girls also had their own special powers. For example, Aries controlled starlight, Scorpio mastered eclipse venom. Even if Lynn couldn't use the other pilgrimages yet, just summoning the Zodiac girls to fight was more than enough. Come to think of it. Didn't this setup resemble how vampires summon familiars? Main world. The moon hung high overhead. Yukino, having just finished another experience grind session, dragged her tired body back home. She had yet to experience mana replenishment from Lynn. Well, that was partly because she hadn't had the opportunity to be alone with him. But, if he really did replenish her mana, just imagining the scene made Yukino unsure of how to feel. Her ears reddened just thinking about it. For her, even mana replenishment was an extremely intimate act. As for other recovery items, although the familia had them, after learning what they were made of, Yukino had immediately refused. The thought alone was just too much. She couldn't accept it. Even the idea of tasting Lynn's mana was less overwhelming than using those items. So, it's fine to be tired, it's part of training. But still, life had felt so fulfilling lately. Yukino felt like she had found a new purpose. At the apartment entrance, Yukino spotted a familiar figure and paused. At the same time, Harano saw her sister. Seeing how exhausted Yukino looked, Harano frowned instinctively. Coming back this late, again? She was already suspicious. After all, where could Yukino, who had no friends and was notoriously aloof, be going so late at night? Even though she eventually came home. Her condition. No dirt, no mess on her clothes. But still. It was hard not to overthink. Harano bit her lip and clicked her tongue. What were you doing coming back this late? She frowned, irritated, and asked with a hint of scolding in her tone. But Yukino didn't take the bait. She replied calmly, it's none of your business, sister. She pulled out her key and opened the apartment door. Harano was stunned for a moment before realizing she had overstepped. Sorry sister, was just worried about you. She immediately shifted to her usual sweet tone. Yukino sighed. If you're not here for anything important, you can leave. Yukino, you're so cold. I waited so long for you to come home, and I don't even get a glass of water. Yukino looked at her sister's exaggerated expression and rubbed her temple. Come in, then. Harano instantly dropped the act and smiled warmly. Living room. Harano asked, Yukino, I heard you joined the Supernatural Investigation Club. That info came from her secret informant, Shizuka Hiratsuka. Yes. Yukino nodded. So, is this how you resolved the issue with your body? Yukino glanced around the room clean, curse-free. Satisfaction flickered in her eyes. Then, can you tell your dear sister how you solved it? Harano was clearly curious. From her perspective, Yukino had clearly recovered. Even if she didn't know where Yukino had been going late at night. Her condition had obviously improved. No more gloom. No more oppressive aura. It was great. So, after joining the Supernatural Investigation Club, how had she managed it? Did this club president Lynn use supernatural powers? Harano was dying to know. But Yukino went silent. She didn't know how to explain it. And if she told her sister that she had completely given herself to a man in exchange for supernatural powers, it might trigger something bad. Especially with their mother. Yukino suddenly felt anxious. So. Sorry. No comment. Harano. She gave Yukino an exasperated glare. Then pouted dramatically. But Yukino didn't budge. Fine. Harano stood up. Even if you won't tell me, I have my ways. She left the apartment. Downstairs, she pulled out her phone and made a call. Buy me a haunted property. Immediately. Haunted. The voice on the other end sounded surprised. That's right. And the more haunted, the better. Harano had come up with a plan back in the apartment. The Supernatural Investigation Club took on outside exorcism requests. If Yukino wouldn't talk, she'd force the club to reveal its secrets. Who knows? Maybe I'll get to hire Yukino myself tomorrow. Harano smiled. Supernatural Investigation Club. She, Harano Yukinashita, was going to peel back its mysterious veil. The next day. Afternoon. Supernatural Investigation Club. Yukino heard a knock on the door of the club. Sister. Yukino, who had been making tea for Lynn, looked surprised. Harano's face stiffened. She opened the door and saw Yukino making tea for a man like a good wife and mother. The sky was falling. Harano forced a smile, barely keeping her emotions in check. After all, this wasn't her territory. She took a deep breath, forcing herself not to look at Yukino, and instead focused her gaze on Lynn. This is the president of the Supernatural Investigation Club, right? Harano didn't act rashly. This man most likely wielded supernatural powers. And he actually managed to tame Yukino into this state. So jealous, no, so angry. He actually made her little sister serve him like that. Deep breaths, deep breaths. Yukino was also a bit embarrassed. Being seen like this by her sister. I heard your Supernatural Investigation Club accepts exorcism commissions outside of school, so I came. Harano got straight to the point. Lynn replied calmly, off-campus exorcisms start at 5 million yen. In truth, the familia wasn't short on such small funds. But Lynn wasn't actively seeking commissions off-campus either. He had to find things for his peerage members to do. Speaking of which, Psycho was already a high-class devil. If he could find a world that wasn't too difficult next time, he could completely leave the invasion to Psycho and the others. As the master, he should be living the life of a freeloader. No problem. Just as Lynn was thinking about his freeloader lifestyle, Harano agreed without hesitation. It was only 5 million yen. Lynn replied blandly, Maiko, go take care of it. After a moment's thought, he added, Yukino, you go too. Since it involved her sister, it was only fitting to let Yukino handle it. Yes. Yukino glanced at her sister helplessly. Harino looked at Yukino, then asked curiously, is the president not going? Lynn looked at her with a faint smile. You want me to take action? I'm afraid you can't afford that price. Hearing that, Harino immediately responded proudly, don't worry, there's nothing the Yukinashita family can't afford. After all, she was the eldest daughter of the Yukinashita family, one of the leaders of Chiba Prefecture. Could she go bankrupt just to exorcise a spirit? Lin pondered for a moment, then asked, what's the market value of the Yukinashita family's assets? Harino looked at him strangely, not sure why he was asking. Still, she answered, around 5 billion yen. Alright then. That's the price. Harino. Wait. Harino's eyes widened instantly. Was this guy toying with her? What, you don't want me to take action anymore? Lin looked at her calmly. Like a thunderclap out of nowhere, Harino's breathing stopped for a moment, and her legs tensed unconsciously. So terrifying. Just one look. Gulp. Harino swallowed hard and said with a forced smile, no need to trouble you. She backed down immediately. Her sharp intuition made her realize how dangerous this man really was. He was insanely dangerous. Harino internally let out a marmot-like scream. Yukino. Harino was starting to worry. After leaving Shuchen Academy, the atmosphere among the three was a bit quiet. Yukino, are you really okay? Harino asked with concern. Being around that man must be dangerous, right? With just one glance from him, she understood something. Human methods were meaningless against him. He was absolutely capable of flipping the entire board. Harino was confident in her judgment. Which was why she gave in so quickly. What? Yukino frowned, not understanding what her sister meant. What problem? She was overjoyed right now. She could feel herself improving every day. That let Yukino feel the value of her own existence. How could that possibly be wrong? Harino opened her mouth, looked over at Maiko, and could only sigh. After walking a while, they arrived at an unfinished building. Maiko and Yukino circled the area, then came to a conclusion. There are no cursed spirits. None. Harino was surprised and looked around. Well. She couldn't see anything anyway. Wasn't this place supposed to be haunted? Harino inwardly complained but smiled and said, it's okay, let's check the next one. A while later. Abandoned construction site. Still nothing. Yukino and Maiko said at the same time. Harino's expression stiffened. Next. After checking 5 different places, the three finally stood before an old apartment building. Maiko looked up. A bloated cursed spirit was staring down at them. Yukino said, looks like you actually stumbled upon one this time, sister. After checking so many places, she finally understood her sister's intentions. She hadn't told her anything yesterday, so today she came to verify things on her own. She probably bought all these properties overnight, right? Back when they were rushing around, her sister clearly wasn't familiar with the locations. What do you mean stumbled upon it? I told you it was haunted here. Harino didn't get embarrassed even after being exposed. But she suddenly thought of something, and her face went stiff. Wait. Stumbled upon it? What does that mean? Harino asked in disbelief, are you saying there's actually something here? Yukino ignored her sister's fussing. She looked at Maiko. Understanding the signal, Maiko said, it's just a grade 2 cursed spirit. Use it to practice. I'll support you from the side. After speaking, Maiko pulled out the twisted mirror. It could influence the outcome of reality, perfect for backup. Yukino looked at her gratefully, then took a deep breath and locked eyes with the cursed spirit. This was her first time facing a grade 2 cursed spirit. Wait. Harino was starting to panic. You've been saying things I don't understand from the start. So, what exactly is there? Yukino frowned and spoke softly, sister, step back. Harino was stunned. This was the first time she'd seen Yukino like this. But after being scolded by her, she finally calmed down. She quietly retreated to a more distant spot. Still. Yukino actually dared to yell at her? She was definitely remembering this grudge. As she was muttering to herself, the cursed spirit noticed Yukino and Maiko. It grinned and said excitedly, you can see me. You can see me. Whoosh. It leapt down from above, charging at them. Maiko raised the spirit word warping mirror. The cursed spirit, which had been lunging toward them, suddenly twisted midair and slammed into the ground nearby. Bang! A deep thud echoed. The violent impact cracked the cement. Seeing this, Harino's eyes widened, her body frozen in place. Even if she couldn't see it, she could clearly see the ground suddenly split open. There really was something. Her voice trembled. Even after everything she'd seen in her life, facing such strange phenomena for the first time was still terrifying. And now? Yukino was going to fight something invisible? She looked at her little sister, full of worry. Then, she saw cold air rising from Yukino's body, snowflakes began falling around her. Harino was dumbfounded. But Yukino's actions didn't stop. She waved her slender hand forward, snow whipped up like a windstorm and flew straight ahead. The cursed spirit tried to dodge, but Maiko's twisted mirror froze it in place. Cursed spirit! Crack crack! As the snow touched its body, it froze it like poison seeping into bone. In an instant, a massive ice sculpture appeared at the base of the old apartment. Harino stared blankly, feeling like she was dreaming. This was too surreal. Yukino had really become that Yukino. Moreover, she glanced at the ice sculpture. Even though it was deformed, it looked like a monster had been frozen inside. But she still couldn't see it. Yukino ignored her sister and walked up to the sculpture. She gently touched it with her pale hand. Bang! The entire sculpture turned to powder. Even the cursed spirit inside disappeared with it. Maiko looked on with envy. She really wanted such a cool ability. After eliminating the cursed spirit, Yukino turned to Harino and said calmly, "Sister, the commission is complete." Seeing her sister frozen in shock, Yukino sighed. She understood the feeling. After all, she had gone through the same thing herself. Her sister would need time to process it. She stepped past Harino and got ready to continue grinding experience with Maiko. Pa! Suddenly, Yukino's arm was grabbed. She turned around in surprise. Her sister was smiling at her stiffly and said, "Yukino, this time, you've gotten ahead of me." Yukino pressed her lips together and didn't reply. "Sister! You're the strong one. You accepted reality far faster than I did. Go on, Yukino. I still have things to do." Yukino gave her a concerned look, then silently walked away. She couldn't help her sister with anything. It had always been like this since childhood. After Yukino left, Harino's expression turned complicated. She glanced back at the old apartment. Then she broke into goosebumps. She shuddered and quickly left the area as well. On the way back, her smile returned. This was an opportunity. On the way back, Harino sat in the car, deep in thought. Yukino definitely didn't have that kind of supernatural power before. The turning point had to be when she joined the Supernatural Investigation Club. So, gaining power is that the solution Yukino mentioned. Harino looked dazed for a moment. But, getting power comes at a price. She recalled Yukino's submissive behavior back at the Supernatural Investigation Club, like a devoted young wife. Now she understood everything. So she sold herself to the president of the Supernatural Investigation Club. Harino was still a little upset about it. This was her precious sister, whom she'd raised for over 10 years. But now that things had reached this point, Harino's mindset changed entirely. Maybe, through Yukino, the Yukinashita family could rise to an even higher level? She couldn't help but recall her own humiliating attempts to break into Tokyo's upper circles injured, bleeding, and humiliated. Harino suddenly let out a chuckle. If they wouldn't let her squeeze in, then she'd take a shortcut and crush them from above. 2 days later, on the weekend. Chiba Prefecture Yukinashita family residence. After listening to Harino's explanation, Yukinashita Fumino, Harino, and Yukino's mother, still found it hard to believe. A supernatural event? Her youngest daughter had even awakened supernatural powers? The more she heard, the more surreal it sounded. Harino wouldn't lie about something like this. But still. Are you really being serious? Even though she trusted Harino, Fumino couldn't help but doubt. After all, this kind of thing was hard to believe without seeing it for oneself. Harino responded helplessly, "You'll know once Yukino gets here." Luckily, she had called Yukino ahead of time and asked her to return home. Otherwise, explaining it would have been impossible. Before long, Yukino returned to the family home in Chiba Prefecture. When she walked in and saw her sister and mother, she still felt a little nervous. With Harino's sharp mind, she must have already guessed how Yukino had gained her powers. Would she be scolded? Yukino glanced nervously at her mother's serious expression and sighed inwardly. But she didn't regret it. After sitting down, Harino got straight to the point. "Yukino, show mom what you can do." Yukino fell silent. Fumino gave Harino a look. This girl was getting more and more disrespectful. Neither said a word. They just stared at Yukino. After a while, Yukino couldn't take it anymore. Sooner or later, this day had to come. She silently exhaled, then raised her hand. A snowflake floated from her palm out of thin air. Hiss, cough cough. Fumino inhaled sharply, but the freezing cold in Yukino's palm made her choke on the breath. Seeing that, Yukino quickly dispelled her ice power. Fumino coughed for a bit, still feeling a chill throughout her body. She couldn't help but shiver. Then she looked at Yukino in disbelief and exclaimed, "So what Harino said, was true." Her daughter had really become someone with supernatural powers. Yukino remained silent, but her heart felt complicated. This might be the first time she'd seen her mother lose control like that. But what she feared more was being questioned and condemned. She had sold herself to a devil in exchange for power. No mother would easily accept something like that, right? Fumino composed herself after a moment and remembered what Harino had said earlier. Power came at a price? Then what had Yukino paid? Seeing the nervous expression on her daughter's face, she had a rough guess. She felt a mix of anger and relief. Yukino actually went that far? Was this still the daughter she knew? As the head of the Yukinashita household, Fumino quickly composed herself, and her anger faded. At the end of the day, she was only upset that her daughter didn't discuss this with the family. But, like Harino, she saw the opportunity. At this point, the Yukinashita family had to seize the chance through Yukino. Realistically, there was no way forward otherwise. It was better to align with the supernatural and take another path. Maybe one day, the Yukinashita family could stand atop society. Yukino, you did well this time. Fumino smiled at Yukino. Yukino was stunned. Wait, what? Mom, isn't mad? Instead, she's supportive? Her face stiffened, and her expression turned a little awkward. Mom, do you really not care about her at all? Yukino, can you explain everything to us in detail? Fumino noticed Yukino's expression, but this was a matter of great importance to the Yukinashita family. She couldn't concern herself with Yukino's feelings right now. Yukino stayed quiet for a while, then said, I need to ask the president first. What could be said and what couldn't had to be decided by Lynn. This girl, really can't be kept at home anymore. She's already siding with him? Fumino's eyes turned complicated. Before long, with Lynn's approval, Yukino gave a brief explanation about devils and the peerage system. Of course, she said nothing about other worlds, the blessing system, or the special devils. Even if it was her family, they weren't part of the peerage. I see. Harino and Fumino both looked surprised. They weren't angry that Yukino had become part of a devil's peerage. Rather than marrying some poor boy in the future, giving herself to a devil in exchange for power sounded far more worthwhile. And most importantly, Yukino was now a devil too. But wasn't Lynn's peerage a little too female-heavy? Fumino frowned, glancing at Yukino. She was indeed cute, but that figure was hard to praise. How could she compete? Yukino could feel the malice from her mother. She crossed her arms and wore an expressionless look. Seeing that, Fumino withdrew her gaze, thought for a moment, and made a decisive announcement. Yukino's existence has made me re-evaluate the future of the Yukinashita family. Fumino regained her composed demeanor, her face serious as she declared in a deep voice. Our Yukinashita family must align ourselves with Mr. Lin. Harino was not surprised at all. From the moment she came here, she already knew what choice their mother would make. Yukino remained quiet. But she wasn't opposed. After becoming a peerage member, she had personally experienced Lin's strength and influence. She was relieved their mother could make such a decision. But Fumino hesitated for a moment, then looked at Yukino again before letting out a helpless sigh. Judging from Yukino's words alone, our Yukinashita family may not hold much weight in Mr. Lin's eyes. She thought for a moment and said, Harino, you should join Mr. Lin's peerage as well. Yukino stared in disbelief. Mom, what are you saying? So if I'm not enough, my sister can make up for it? Yukino's eyes showed frustration and defiance. Harino rubbed her forehead. Yukino was lacking, it was true. She looked down at her own curvaceous figure and fell into deep thought. To become part of Lin's peerage. She was honestly interested. What would it feel like to wield supernatural power? But Yukino had mentioned that not everyone qualified to join, which made her uneasy and a bit anxious. Whether she was qualified or not was another matter, she definitely wouldn't accept being inferior to Yukino. I understand. Harino agreed without hesitation. Yukino gave her a complicated look. She silently muttered in her heart. That agreement was a little too cheerful. All right then, Harino will go to Shichun again tomorrow. Oh, and Fumino suddenly added, make sure to bring the Yukinashita family's sincerity. She had made up her mind to bet everything on this. So, the next day. Afternoon Supernatural Investigation Club. Harino, who had been waiting for a long time, immediately found Lynn. Lynn sat on a chair, casually looking over the Yukinashita family's property transfer agreement on the table and chuckled. You're really going all in. Of course, Lynn didn't care about the Yukinashita family's business. But for them, this was a major move. Harino lowered her head slightly. Please accept the Yukinashita family's offering. She knew this bit of wealth likely meant nothing to a devil like Lynn. But it was everything the Yukinashita family had. And Harino raised her head. If possible, I'd like to request to join your peerage, Mr. Lin. Oh. Lin rested his chin on his hand with interest. Yukino should have told you what becoming one of my peerage means. Of course. It means becoming part of Mr. Lin's harem. Harino nodded without hesitation and smiled. For me, that's the best possible outcome. The Yukinashita family's development had stagnated. Eventually, for the sake of the family, she would have to face this kind of situation anyway. Rather than associating with sleazy, greedy men. Spending her life with someone like Mr. Lin was a blessing. Besides, Lin wasn't just handsome, he was capable. He could grant her supernatural power, and maybe even help the Yukinashita family reach new heights. In short, it was an incredible deal. Harino honestly felt like she owed Lin something. She had never made such a profitable trade in her life. Harino's eyes were burning with determination as she declared, Mr. Lin, please, accept me into your harem. Silence. The Supernatural Investigation Club fell into a strange, heavy silence. Mahiru and the others stared at Harino, completely stunned. None of them had expected her to say something so bold. Yukino silently turned her back. She didn't want to look at her passionate older sister. Lin was stunned too. This woman really wasn't ordinary. So daring. But then, as you wish. Lin had always been welcoming to everyone. Of course. It was selective. If Harino didn't meet the qualifications to become a member of the peerage, Lin would never accept her. He didn't even bother being polite when it came to the Yukinashita family's assets. They were his peerage's resources now anyway. Lin planned to assign the Yukinashita family the responsibility of managing the sale of resources from the worlds under his control. The Yukinashita family also needed to diversify its development. After all, each world's resources had their own unique traits. A short while later, after wrapping up some miscellaneous matters, Lin looked at Harino. All right, take it off. Harino wasn't surprised. She'd already heard about it from Yukino. She was fully prepared and began undressing without hesitation. Then, turning her back to him, she revealed it. Lin pressed the condensed evil piece onto her back. The cold sensation made Harino shiver slightly. She was both nervous and expectant. The next moment, the power in her body surged. Her blessing information appeared on her back. Yukinashita Harino. Devil rank, low-class devil. Race, devil. Peerage Master, Lin Valifor. Stats. Strength, I0. Agility, I0. Durability, I0. Magic, I0. Innate abilities. 1000-layer game. When formulating long-term plans or strategic layouts, her thinking speed and logical clarity increase in proportion to the complexity. If the target has psychological vulnerabilities or unresolved internal conflicts, the success rate of verbal manipulation increases significantly, potentially allowing her to subtly influence decisions. This ability is less effective against purely instinct-driven individuals but provides a suppressive effect against high IQ targets. Disguised Devil. Perfect Mask, can alter appearance, voice, and even fragments of memory to create an ultra-realistic illusion. Devil Transformation, activates a personality masking mode. Another special devil. Lin rubbed his chin. Seems like both Yukinashita sisters are high quality. But, despite being special devils, Harino's abilities weren't particularly powerful. She wasn't the combat type. Coincidentally, she was well suited for handling the family's finances. After copying her blessing info, Lin said, all right. Hearing that, Harino put her clothes back on and received her blessing information. After Yukino explained the blessing system to her, Harino's eyes sparkled with intrigue. A surprise, huh? And she murmured softly, disguised devil. Was this ability telling her that she lives behind a mask? A disguised devil? Yukino perked up her ears. Looks like her sister was also reincarnated as a special devil. But disguise. Yukino thought of her own skill. Looks like deception and disguise type skills were ineffective on her, right? She felt a little proud, quietly pleased. A small victory. After Harino adapted to her newfound powers and blessing, Lin began discussing her future duties. Finance. Harino was briefly stunned, but then quickly nodded. Understood. It wasn't much different from what she did before, just developing the peerage's business. Besides, her skills weren't suited for combat anyway. She was slightly envious of Yukino. Thinking of Yukino's ice-based powers, and then looking at her own disguised devil. Harino couldn't help but sigh inwardly. Still, disguised devil fit her perfectly. When it came to business development within human society, she'd have far more tools at her disposal. The peerage currently controls resources from 2 worlds. When the time comes, your Yukinashita company will be handling their distribution. Perhaps. Lin rested his chin on his hand, his red eyes watching her. The Yukinashita family should consider opening a new department. 2. World Resources. Harino was dumbfounded. What? Why couldn't she wrap her head around it? Seeing her confused expression, Lynn briefly explained the situation with the zombie world and the black bullet world. Upon hearing this, Harano's eyelids twitched. Was the peerage she joined just that powerful? Not only did they control 2 entire worlds, they even wiped out humanity in one of them. Only now did she grasp the true might of the devil peerage. They'd destroy humanity if things didn't go their way. If that's not being a devil, then what is? Of course, after understanding the situation, Harano felt the peerage was still being too reserved. The humans in the Black Bullet world should have been erased down to the soul. After fully comprehending the state of the 2 worlds, Harano immediately proposed various strategies and development plans. She didn't even want to waste the walls in those worlds. A true professional. Listening to her analysis, Lynn nodded. All right, I'll leave the rest to you. Honestly, he didn't quite get it. He only had a vague grasp of business. More importantly, as the master of the peerage, all he needed to do was live a leisurely life. By the way, Harano blinked, asking curiously, has Yukino already slept with Master Lin? While saying that, she even made a gesture with her hands. Sister, sister. Yukino couldn't sit still anymore, bristling like a startled cat. Mahiru and the others pursed their lips. This Yukinashita sister was way too bold and blunt. Oh. Seeing Yukino's reaction, Harano suddenly understood, then curled her lips in disdain. So their mom was right not to place any hopes on Yukino. She'd already joined the harem, but she was still waiting for Lin to take the initiative. She looked around, and her eye twitched. Just the girls in the Supernatural Investigation Club alone couldn't be scheduled every day. Not to mention the ones gaining experience in other worlds. In matters like this, you had to seize the opportunity yourself. Useless Yukino would never get it. Besides, even if both were members of the peerage, the closeness between those who've slept with Lin and those who haven't was clearly different. Mom really understood Yukino well. If she couldn't count on her sister, she'd have to step up herself. For the rise of the Yukinashita family, she'd offer her precious first time. Taking a deep breath, her lovely face suddenly leaned in close to Lin, voice seductive, Master Lin, would you like me to accompany you tonight? As she said that, her ears burned red. But this was who she was. Some things were better done early. Delay too long, and you get nothing. She was decisive. Sister. Yukino was completely stunned. She had never seen her sister act so assertively. And she was even volunteering herself to the master's bed? Yukino was still too far from understanding the adult world. Of course, it wasn't just Yukino who was stunned. Maiko and Mahiru were equally shocked. This new peerage member was trying to cut in line as soon as she joined. The sky is falling. Lin was also a little surprised by Harano's directness and initiative. But, as always, Lin never turned down anyone who took the first step. As long as they were proactive, Lin was happy to tell them a good night story. I'm looking forward to tonight. You won't be disappointed. Bang. Harano's heart skipped a beat. The moment Lin truly accepted her, she felt a bit lightheaded. After all, this was her first time dealing with something like this. But she still managed to stay composed. Though, not everyone could remain calm. He really agreed? Yukino subconsciously glanced at Maiko, her eyes full of doubt. Didn't they agree to take turns? Maiko silently averted her gaze, not daring to meet Yukino's eyes. Her little trick had been exposed in less than a week. The image of a dignified peerage senpai was starting to collapse. Competition within the peerage was truly intense. Seeing Maiko like that, Yukino sighed again. She'd been taught a harsh lesson on her first day in the peerage. Back when Maiko was helping her train, she was so gentle. Yukino, I'll use your room tonight. What? Yukino, still not over the last blow, was struck again by her sister. Her room? Her sister and Lin, together? The image instantly popped into her mind. Her sister and Lin, completely unclothed, on her bed. Suddenly, Yukino felt her face heating up. Her body trembled slightly. She blurted out without thinking, what about me? Harano looked at her strangely. You'll sleep in the living room, of course. Huh? Then Harano's eyes twitched, and she smiled slyly. Or, do you want to join us? Join them. Yukino's eyes spun like spirals. That night, Yukinashita Yukino ultimately slept in the living room. As for joining, no way. She pulled the quilt over her face. But in her ears, the obscene sounds from upstairs continued. Yukino clutched her legs under the blanket, subconsciously rubbing them together. Her face was so red, it looked like it might bleed. Sister, you're so loud. She muttered under her breath. Why? Why did I even come home? Wouldn't it have been better to find a hotel? Why torture herself like this? Yukino twisted under the quilt, as if ants were crawling all over her. Itchy. Master Lin, how about this position? Upstairs, Harano's sultry voice rang straight into Yukino's ears. As if she was doing it on purpose, just to let her hear it. Yukino panted, eyelids fluttering, before finally dozing off half asleep. The next morning, Yukino woke up with dark circles under her eyes, glaring weakly at Harano. Why aren't you wearing anything? What's the big deal? Harano didn't care, walking over to the fridge and pulling out 2 bottles of iced cola. She was feeling a little hot and needed to cool down. Be a good girl, go to school now. Ah. As if remembering something, Harano blinked at her. Don't forget to ask for leave from Master Lin. Saying that, Harano returned upstairs. Her battle wasn't over yet. Yukino stood frozen downstairs. So this is what Yukino saw before. Harano held her weapon as she stared at the grotesque cursed spirit before her. After her night with Lin, Harano had been eager to test her own abilities. And she glanced at Lin beside her, the corners of her lips curling into a smug smile. As expected. After getting into bed with Lin, their relationship had improved significantly. This really was the fastest way to build intimacy. She knew that not many peerage members had been personally guided by Master Lin during their first time. Even Yukino hadn't received that treatment. Humph. Harano felt quite proud. As she neared the cursed spirit, a strange voice suddenly echoed in her ear. Can you see me? Can you see me? Hi. Harano exhaled, trying to calm the tension in her chest. Seeing this, Lin reassured her, don't worry, this type of cursed spirit is very weak. Okay. Harano nodded and, without hesitation, unleashed her magic at the cursed spirit. Swish. The cursed spirit let out a sharp cry before disappearing in an instant. Harano blinked in disbelief. Did I really just do that? Without a doubt, Lin affirmed. Harano smiled brightly, like a child who had just been praised. After taking down a few more cursed spirits in succession, Lin said, try using your disguise devil ability. Hi. Harano paused for a moment and said hesitantly, but disguise devil doesn't have much combat capability. Not necessarily. After their close interaction the night before, Lin suspected there was more to disguise devil than what appeared on the surface. I understand. Harano nodded and took a deep breath. Disguise devil. Buzz. Her pupils began to shimmer, and a series of human silhouettes flashed across her vision. As long as she had some knowledge about someone, she could disguise herself as them. The deeper the understanding, the more perfect the disguise. The next moment, a particular figure in her vision stood still. Harano was caught off guard by what she saw. It was Lynn. Her heart stirred slightly. She and Lynn were already quite close, right? Then let's try taking on Lynn's appearance. Harano focused her thoughts, and her body began to shimmer. But there's no change. Harano was confused. Could it be that she didn't understand Lynn well enough? No. She had to deepen their connection again tonight. Since she couldn't transform into Lynn, Harano shifted her target naturally. Alright. Let's try Yukino. Buzz. Harano's body once again shimmered and distorted. And then, Yukino made a stunning appearance. Harano leaned forward and gasped. That looks so real. Lynn's mouth twitched slightly, nearly laughing aloud. Is that how you confirm if it's realistic? Harano's transformation became more refined, even her temperament perfectly mimicking Yukino's. Suddenly, Harano had a mischievous idea. Master Lin, would you like me to stay in this form tonight? You really know how to mess with people. Harano grinned playfully as she calmed herself and carefully focused on the state of her disguise. Wait. Her expression shifted. She could feel a hidden force within her body. She raised her hand and focused her will. Whoosh. The next second, snowflakes began forming in her palm. Harano was stunned. Isn't this Yukino's power? Lin was a bit surprised as well. So this was this the true nature of disguise devil? He thought for a moment and said, try using it. Following Lin's instruction, Harano nodded and waved her hand forward. Whoosh. A gust of frost surged forward. But so weak. Harano frowned at the snow that barely reached a meter ahead. Lin touched his chin and analyzed, maybe your overall strength is still too low, or your understanding of the target isn't deep enough. Or disguise devil might only replicate a portion of the original ability. Hearing Lin's analysis, Harano nodded quickly. She was confident in business matters, but Lin was undoubtedly the expert when it came to power and abilities. It all sounded very plausible. Still, even if it's not at the original level, I'm already very satisfied. Harano released her disguise devil form, a bright smile on her face. She had initially thought it was just a simple disguise ability. She never expected it could also mimic abilities. This was already far beyond her expectations. Good potential, Lin praised. Perhaps once Harano's level increased, the disguises she created would be even more powerful? A special devil, anything was possible. After grinding some more cursed spirits for experience, Lynn brought Harino to the zombie world and the Black Bullet world to show her the current situations in detail. That night, they naturally stayed in the other world. Harino even planned to use Disguise Devil to give Lynn a variety of experiences. Unfortunately, Disguise Devil couldn't handle such intense impact. So it ended midway. But this only fueled Harino's desire to grow stronger. Disguise Devil was such a useful skill, it had to be upgraded. Lynn must have multiple experiences through her alone. Back in the main world. Seeing that her sister and Lynn hadn't returned, Yukino let out a breath of relief, though her feelings were mixed. Tonight, she could finally return to her own bedroom. But inside her room, Yukino sniffed the air with a conflicted look and stared at her bed. Can I even use this bed anymore? She looked troubled. In the end, blushing, Yukinashita Yukino still laid down on it. There's no spare bed sheet, there's nothing I can do. She muttered softly, unsure who she was trying to explain herself to. Her sister, and Lynn's scent lingered. A few days later. After understanding the situation of the peerage and drafting several business plans, Harino finally returned to the Yukinashita household. How was it? Fumino asked, her tone impatient. It was amazing. Harino's cheeks flushed as she hugged herself, eyes dazed. Master Lin's arms were so strong. When he lifted my legs. Stop. Fumino immediately interrupted, her expression dark. I didn't ask to hear those details. Hey. Harino blinked, puzzled. Then what do you want to hear? Abilities. The peerage's situation. Harino smiled slyly and then activated her ability. Her form shimmered. And someone identical to Fumino appeared before her. Fumino froze. What is this? Disguise Devil. My ability. Fumino clicked her tongue. It's not just the appearance, the voice and aura are identical. Harino smiled. Pretty good, right? Fumino nodded. It suits you very well. I think so too. And Harino suddenly turned shy. Master Lin likes it, too. That night, I even used this appearance. The teacup in Fumino's hand shook violently. What the hell did you do? Haha. Harino laughed and released the disguise. Relax, relax, I was just joking. Hearing that, Fumino let out a long sigh, still in shock, her heart pounding. Of course. Harino suddenly smiled and said, if Master Lin really liked it, I wouldn't say no. Fumino froze. Harino leaned closer and whispered, I hope you can understand me, mother. Fumino's brow furrowed as she gripped her teacup tightly. But eventually, she let out a long sigh and awkwardly changed the subject. Let's talk about the peerage's situation. Harino's eyes glinted with mischief. She felt a bit of revenge satisfaction. Well, it couldn't be helped. Her mother had been too controlling. As for the peerage's situation, Harino grinned and said, sorry, mother. I can't tell you anything about the peerage. Fumino's eyes widened in surprise. Harino spoke calmly. After all, you're an outsider to the peerage. You. Fumino opened her mouth, wanting to say something. She had brought up the idea of Harino joining the peerage, yet she was considered an outsider. You've completely turned your back on me? Fumino fell silent. Harino didn't push any further. She still respected her mother. Don't worry, mother. Even though I can't tell you everything. Harino stood up. I will carry the Yukinashita name to heights you couldn't even imagine. With that, she left Chiba Prefecture. After she departed, Fumino remained seated, head lowered in silence. Finally, she let out a long breath and muttered, let them do whatever they want. But the peerage. Fumino's eyes flickered. She recalled what Harino had said before. Using her image. How could that unfilial daughter say something like that? Her cheeks flushed, and she spat softly. But still. Would Lin really like someone as old and faded as her? At the same time, Maiko, Yukino, and Yui, who were training as usual, suddenly ran into something unexpected. Higurashi Shrine, halfway up the mountain. Help! In the distance. A rumbling sound suddenly erupted from a shrine. Eh? What was that? Yui flinched at the noise and exclaimed. Yukino frowned, hesitating for a moment. That direction, seems to be Higurashi Shrine. She and Yui had been there before, so the impression was clear. Just as she finished speaking. Boom! The rumbling intensified, and the trees on the shrine's mountainside began collapsing from top to bottom. It's coming. Maiko's expression turned serious. Suddenly, a monstrous centipede-like creature leapt out from the mountain. Its body resembled a massive centipede, complete with hundreds of legs and a woman's face on its head. It looked utterly horrifying. In front of it, a beautiful girl in a Shuchian Academy uniform was running for her life, tears streaming down her face. Help! Yukino and Yui were stunned. That's Higurashi-san. Back when they visited the shrine, it had been Higurashi Kagome who welcomed them. But what the hell was going on now? There was no time to think. Yukino and Yui instinctively rushed toward the scene. Seeing this, Maiko didn't hesitate either. From her perception, the massive centipede didn't possess significant strength. With the three of them, it would be easy to handle. Higurashi-san! Yui shouted, catching Kagome's attention. When Kagome saw them, she was briefly stunned, then quickly cried out, "Don't come over! It's a monster!" She was kind-hearted and didn't want to drag anyone else into danger. That monster was clearly targeting her. Yui blinked, touched. Higurashi-san, you're such a good person. Giving her a good person card in this situation. Kagome silently complained in her heart. Feeling the foul breath approaching from behind, Kagome despaired. Goodbye, Mom. Goodbye, cruel world. But she hadn't even fallen in love yet. Dying like this was too tragic. Just then, she suddenly saw Yukino standing in front of her. Kagome panicked. Don't. Before she could finish, she saw pale blue snowflakes forming in Yukino's palm. Yukino swung her arm sharply. Crack crack. The sound of freezing echoed instantly. Boom. The centipede demon crashed to the ground. Hi. Kagome's eyes widened in shock, frozen in place. Yukino frowned. Let's get out of here first. Ah, right. Kagome's execution was quick, she immediately moved away from the centipede witch. Yukino fixed her gaze on the still struggling creature. With her current strength, she couldn't completely freeze it in one move. But she could stall it with a partial freeze. Maiko. On it. Wait, I'll buff you first. Yui activated her harmonizer skill. Maiko didn't hesitate, she released her magic and dealt a finishing blow. As a mid-class devil, this level of cursed spirit was no threat. Soon enough, the centipede witch was completely dead. Phew. Yui exhaled in relief. Among the three of them, she was the only one without a special ability. But at least she could support her teammates with buffs. Kagome stared blankly at the scene before her, a sense of surrealism overwhelming her. What just happened? A monster suddenly popped out of the well and a trio of superpowered girls saved her? Mom, is this still the world I know? You all are. Now that she was safe, Kagome cautiously asked. Yukino glanced at Maiko and Yui. Seeing neither intended to explain, she stepped forward. Shuchin Academy. Supernatural Investigation Club. Hi. Kagome blinked in disbelief. She'd heard of the Supernatural Investigation Club before. After all, it was a club made up of all beautiful girls. And the only male member was the club president. So the Supernatural Investigation Club was quite infamous at Shuchin. Especially among the boys, overflowing with envy and jealousy. So, the Supernatural Investigation Club really has supernatural powers. Kagome still couldn't quite believe it. Something like that, Yukino replied vaguely. Then she asked, what exactly happened? At that, Kagome couldn't help but complain. It's that weird well again. It makes strange noises every day. Today it got especially loud, so I opened it and took a look. And then she paused, her face still full of fear. You saw it? That monster crawled out of the well. Kagome hesitated. Can your Supernatural Investigation Club solve the issue with that well? This. Yukino hesitated, then replied, this is our first encounter, so I'm not sure. Kagome looked a bit disappointed. But our club president will definitely handle it. Yukino said firmly. Really? Kagome's eyes lit up, and she quickly grabbed Yukino's arm. Please. Please ask your president for help. Yukino hesitated. But our president charges a pretty hefty fee. Expensive. Kagome froze. Yukino nodded. Our Supernatural Investigation Club charges for any exorcism outside of school grounds. By the way, the base rate for any member's service starts at 5 million yen. 5 million. Kagome's eyes went wide and she collapsed to her knees with a lifeless expression. It's over. Her last glimmer of hope. Destroyed by one word poor. Seeing her state, Yukino and the others realized she probably couldn't afford it. After a moment of thought, Maiko stepped forward and handed her a special devil flyer, modified by Lynn himself. Back when Lynn couldn't sense a summoning across worlds, he made improvements using devil's summoning. Now, even if he was in another world, he could still detect a call for help. This is. Kagome accepted the flyer with a puzzled look. If you're ever in danger again, just shout, Devil-sama, please help me. Someone from our Supernatural Investigation Club will appear. Of course, you might end up paying a different kind of price. Kagome quickly took the devil flyer, bowing in gratitude. I got it. Thank you. Although, why Devil-sama? Kagome found it a little odd, but didn't say anything. She just assumed it was part of the club's quirky branding. After settling Kagom's issue, the three girls stared at the massive corpse of the centipede demon, heads aching. So, what do we do with this? Leave it here. Should we ask the president? After seeing the message in the group chat, Lynn gave instructions, send it to the Black Bullet world. Give it to Muroto Sumair for research. Consider it recycling. Maybe she could figure something out? But... Higurashi Shrine? Higurashi Kagome. Lynn narrowed his eyes. I didn't expect this world to include the Inuyasha universe. The appearance of Higurashi Kagome was indeed unexpected. So, does the Bone Eater's well that connects through time also exist? Lynn's thoughts stirred. If he recalled correctly, the well's connection was to 500 years in the past, right? And during that period, the underworld should have been in chaos? Curious, Lynn took a step and instantly arrived at Higurashi Shrine. Back Mountain, Higurashi Shrine. A dried-up well stood quietly. Lynn walked over and examined it carefully. There's definitely a spatial fluctuation. But without a time-space type ability, Lynn couldn't confirm if it was truly temporal. After a moment's thought, he simply jumped in. Thud. Landing at the bottom, Lynn fell silent. He felt nothing, no sensation of traveling through time. So. He looked up at the moonlight above. Looks like I didn't go back 500 years. Lynn frowned. Was it not time yet? Or did it require the Shiken jewel? Or maybe it needed a specific person? Thinking for a bit, Lynn's figure vanished. The next second. Higurashi Kagome's bedroom. Lynn appeared without warning. He looked around casually. A very pink, very girly room. And a beautiful girl in pajamas was sitting on the bed, picking at her feet? No. I was clipping my nails. Kagome blushed and shouted in protest. Wait. She suddenly froze, then her eyes widened. How did you get in here? Lynn thought for a moment. I walked in. Why did that sound like a question? Kagome silently screamed inside. Also. Who are you? Kagome clutched her blanket tightly and scooted back into bed, looking on guard. This man is super dangerous. He just popped out of nowhere, this is definitely not normal. Especially after encountering supernatural stuff today, her instincts were screaming. I'm the president of the Supernatural Investigation Club. Lynn introduced himself casually. Kagome blinked, then muttered, but I didn't summon you. She glanced over at the devil flyer on her desk. Right. She hadn't summoned him. Then just consider it a self-summoning. Kagome. This is forced service, isn't it? Lynn asked, you want that well problem solved, don't you? Yes. Kagome nodded without hesitation. Then that's that. Lynn nodded, picked her up, and walked toward the dry well. Hey. Kagome yelled, flustered. I haven't even changed clothes yet. Not important. Ah. Midway, Lynn suddenly said, don't forget to pay me. Kagome was dumbfounded. Why is this happening? Isn't that well yours? Aren't you the one who wants it dealt with? Kagome. She slumped weakly. But you can clearly see how rundown this shrine is. Lynn grinned. It's fine. You'll definitely be able to afford the price I want. Kagome. Kagome's expression was subtle. Something felt off. But things had already progressed this far. Besides, she was genuinely curious about the secrets hidden within the dry well. Higurashi Shrine, Back Mountain. In front of the dry well. Lynn said, let's go. Go. Kagome looked around in confusion. Where are we going? Lynn silently pointed at the dry well. Kagome froze, craning her neck to peer into the darkness below. It looked like a pitch-black cave where she couldn't even see her own fingers. She shivered instinctively. Especially. Are we really going down? That monster came out of here. Kagome shrank back in fear. But Lynn didn't ask for her opinion. He simply grabbed her waist and jumped down. Kagome's scream echoed inside the hollow well. Lynn remained calm, automatically tuning out her shrill voice as he narrowed his eyes. The scene within the dry well was entirely different from earlier. It was like a tunnel through time and space, filled with flickering images of an ancient past. And the grudges of monsters. Lynn's face remained composed as he quietly released a wave of magic, crushing the spirits of the monsters who were lunging toward him in resentment. So it really was connected to time and space. Lynn glanced at the terrified Kagome who had shut her eyes tightly. He then closed his own, carefully sensing the spatial fluctuations inside the well. But it's not that simple. Lynn frowned. Capturing the energy of this level of space-time fluctuation wasn't easy. And he didn't have the luxury of staying here for too long. In the blink of an eye, Lynn and Kagome had landed at the bottom of the well. But Kagome's screams continued without pause. Lynn casually raised his hand and pinched her cheek, cutting her off. Kagome, forcibly silenced, blinked in confusion before realizing they had already reached the bottom. Huh? Nothing happened. She patted her lips, visibly relieved. Lynn gave her a sidelong glance. Keep your eyes closed. That way, even if something happens, you won't know. TCH. Kagam forced an awkward smile. Then she looked up toward the opening of the well. It was still dark outside, but... She sniffed the air lightly, a look of confusion flashing in her eyes. Why? Did it smell like fresh grass? And... why were there strange, distant noises? Let's go take a look. 500 years ago. Lin was also curious about this era. As he spoke, he grabbed Kagam by the waist again and leapt out of the well. This is... Kagam looked around, and her eyes widened in shock. Is this, really my home? It didn't look anything like the back mountain she remembered. And... that massive tree in the distance. It looked exactly like the one at home. What's going on? Kagam's mind went blank. Lin had no intention of explaining anything. Instead, he looked eastward. A surge of demonic energy soared into the sky. Lin frowned slightly. This kind of plot wasn't in Inuyasha, was it? But... since it was a mashed-up world, anything could happen. Whoosh! Suddenly, something huge came crashing down from the sky. It looked like a wild boar, with an arrow embedded in its forehead. Lin could feel a powerful purification force radiating from the arrow. This energy... could it be Kikyo? Lin was a little surprised. On the other side, Kagam opened her mouth as if to scream in fear upon seeing the beast. But before she could, Lin raised his hand and silenced her again. With a casual slash, he cut the beast into several chunks, which crashed to the ground with a loud thud. Blood splattered everywhere. Kagam barely held herself back from screaming. So strong. The president of the Supernatural Investigation Club was really powerful. A sense of security surged within her. Kagam quietly leaned a little closer to Lin. Then she once again felt his warm hand gripping the soft flesh at her waist. Hi! Before she could process it, Lin had already stepped forward and rushed toward the east. Kagam was going crazy. Could he stop flying so aggressively? It'd feel much safer. Musashi Province, Kaed Village. Countless monsters had surrounded Kaed Village. Blue-skin demons, red-skin demons, wolf demons, snake demons. All kinds of yokai gathered, launching attacks toward the barrier protecting the village. Bang! Bang! Streams of demonic fire struck the transparent barrier. Human wench? Hand over the Shiken jewel already. A massive purple-black snake demon whipped its tail, repeatedly slamming against the barrier while roaring furiously. The surrounding monsters cackled in agreement at the snake demon's words. Suddenly, crack! A sound echoed from the barrier. The monsters froze for a moment, then their eyes turned bloodshot, their breathing grew ragged. Haha! The barrier's breaking. The Shiken jewel is mine. Once the barrier collapses, every demon for themselves. With the hope of obtaining the Shiken jewel right before their eyes, the monsters grew wild with excitement. At the same time, they began eyeing each other with hostility. The allure of the Shiken jewel was too great. Cooperation had never been on the table. If not for their shared hatred of the priestess, these monsters would have never fought side by side. Crack crack! The barrier continued to weaken. Inside the barrier, a beautiful woman in a white shrine maiden's outfit stood calmly, gazing indifferently at the frenzied demons outside. Her dark eyes were calm and cold, her features refined. Her jet-black hair was tied with a white ribbon, and she carried an old bow and arrows on her back. Lady Kikyo, I don't think the barrier can last much longer. A man with a stern face stepped forward, fear evident in his eyes, but he didn't retreat, standing by Kikyo's side at the edge of the village. And there were more villagers just like him. Kikyo wasn't fighting alone. Even if they couldn't contribute much, they wouldn't allow her to face the threat alone. Kikyo's gaze swept over the monsters, her expression unchanged, but inside, she felt helpless. Ever since taking responsibility for the Shiken jewel, Kaed village had suffered continuous attacks. This time was particularly troubling. It was as if the monsters had planned it in advance, rushing toward the village all at once. Though there were no great demons among them, their sheer numbers made up for it. The barrier wouldn't hold for long. Even if it broke, Kikyo was confident she could fight them off. But... she looked at the villagers behind her and gently bit her lip. Kaed village would still be caught in the crossfire. These people... she couldn't let that happen. This was her responsibility. Kikyo took a deep breath. Her eyes were firm, tinged with quiet sadness. She pulled an arrow from her quiver with slender fingers. She drew her bow and fired. Zhang! The white glowing arrow flew forward, wrapped in a whirlwind of spiritual energy. Demon-breaking arrow! Her soft, cool voice rang out. Boom! The arrow pierced through the snake demon's skull. Kikyo's eyes flashed as she detonated its spiritual power. Boom! The powerful explosion instantly cleared a portion of the battlefield. But the monsters only hesitated briefly before quickly filling in the gap. The priestess might be strong, but there were too many of them. If pushed, they'd use combined techniques. And once they did, the Shikan jewel would be theirs. Not even Abe no Seimei could save them then. Roar! Kikyo's attack only further fueled their frenzy. More cracks formed in the barrier. Kikyo could only continue launching demon-breaking arrows to relieve the pressure. But it was clear this couldn't continue forever. Kikyo knew that. And yet, a sense of powerlessness engulfed her. Though she was strong, she lacked large-scale offensive abilities. What's more, she sensed something far more dangerous hidden behind the crowd of monsters. She didn't believe this group of yokai had acted with such unity on their own. What should she do? For the first time in her life, Kikyo felt truly powerless. Was it arrogant of her to take on the burden of the Shikan jewel? Maybe she shouldn't have stayed in Maple Village. Her decision had dragged innocent people into danger. Kikyo lowered her head and whispered, God. If you can hear me, please answer my prayer. Please, protect Kaed village. This shrine maiden, always calm and dignified, finally revealed her inner vulnerability. As a Miko, her first instinct was to pray. But would it work? Kikyo felt bitter. She had long grown used to silence. Even though she prayed constantly, she had never once heard a response. Sometimes, she even doubted herself. Was she truly a proper Miko? Otherwise, why had the gods never answered her? This time would be the same, right? Just as Kikyo was lost in thought. For some unknown reason, the monsters outside suddenly froze. Whoosh! A tiny flame sparked into existence. Like a flickering star. The next second, that spark burst into a roaring blaze. In an instant, the ocean of monsters was swallowed by flames. A searing wind blew. The terrifying fire lit up the night sky like day. Within the barrier, the villagers stared in stunned silence, then a reverent awe washed over them. Is that a god? Someone murmured. As if sparked by those words. Yes, it's a god. A miracle. It's truly a miracle. The gods are watching over us. The villagers of Kaed village knelt on the ground, bowing toward the flames. Their despair and fear were swept away. The gods had come, they were saved. God. Kikyo stared blankly at the sea of fire. Could it be real? Just then, a tall figure stepped into view. He walked calmly through the flames. Behind him was a blazing sea of fire, shimmering like starlight. Lin raised his gaze, locking eyes with Kikyo. Then he grinned. Your god is long dead. Priestess. How about converting to a devil? Chapter 120, Walking Disaster Shrine Maiden. Did their god really die? Lin's words caused a tremendous shock in Kikyo's heart. A faint crack formed in the faith she had always held. As a shrine maiden, Kikyo had been taught to revere the gods since childhood. She had always believed in their existence. But now, someone had told her that God was already dead? Ha! Kikyo exhaled slowly, trying to compose herself. Not necessarily. Maybe this man was just blasphemous. But somewhere deep in her heart, she had a feeling that what he said might be true. Her gaze shifted toward Lin. Devil. This word made Kikyo slightly confused. Having lived in Musashi province all her life, she had never come into contact with any real knowledge about devils. She had only seen similar descriptions in ancient texts. Although the word sounded sinister. What exactly was a devil? Was it similar to an evil spirit? With that thought, Kikyo's expression turned a bit more serious. Her grip on her bow tightened. Even though the man in front of her had helped eliminate the threat to Kaed village, she couldn't afford to let her guard down. What if he had come for the Shikan jewel? Lin seemed oblivious to her caution. He raised his hand and knocked gently on the barrier, producing a dull thunk. Crack! In the blink of an eye, countless cracks spread across the barrier. Then boom, it shattered into countless particles of light and dispersed into the air. Lin smiled at her. Won't you invite me in? Kikyo. He'd already let himself in. What could she even say? Kikyo's heart sank. The same barrier that withstood a coordinated siege of monsters had been shattered by a simple knock. But then again, this was the man who incinerated an entire horde of demons in an instant. A high-level yokai? Kikyo guessed silently, but didn't show it outwardly. I sincerely thank you for your help. She bowed her head slightly in gratitude, though her tone remained cold and distant. Then, Kikyo's eyes narrowed slightly. Please tell me your purpose for coming here. Even though Lin had saved Maple Village, her question was blunt. But the presence of the Shikan jewel meant she couldn't afford to take chances. Especially not when facing a man who claimed to be a devil. Sorry. Kikyo quietly apologized to Lin in her heart. Across from her, Lin stared at her with amusement. So this really was Kikyo. Was the Bone Eater's well acting up again? The Kikyo before him wasn't just alive, she was youthful and in her prime. Well, it didn't matter. In an anime world, anything was possible. Lin gave her a gentle, polite smile. Then he raised his hand and asked, "Are you worried about this thing?" Kikyo was stunned for a moment. Then she noticed a bead glowing with a purple hue spinning between Lin's fingers. The Shiken Jewel. While talking with Kikyo, he had already made a quick trip to the shrine. Across from Lin. Kikyo's cold expression cracked. Her eyes trembled as she whispered, "The Shiken Jewel." Her heart clenched violently. Her fingers instinctively gripped her bow tightly. So strong. This man was terrifying. She had clearly placed the jewel inside the shrine. And now it was in his hand. So fast that she hadn't even sensed anything. Of course. He could have retrieved it earlier with some unknown technique. But that didn't change the fact that he was overwhelmingly powerful. Being able to take the jewel right under her nose without being detected. This man, who called himself a devil, was definitely not someone she could afford to offend. Lin's smile remained gentle. "So? Can I come in now?" "Ha!" Kikyo took a deep breath, turned slightly, and bowed her head. "Please, come in." Seeing this, Lin smiled and casually put away the Shiken Jewel. Kikyo said nothing, but her lips tightened. The jewel hadn't been tainted, right? Just as she was lost in thought, a familiar voice suddenly rang out from behind. "Wait! Wait for me!" Kagam ran over, panting heavily. "Who's this?" Seeing her, Kikyo blinked in confusion. My apprentice shrine maiden." Lin thought for a moment, then casually gave an answer. "Maiko." Kikyo lowered her head, murmuring softly. "So? That line earlier about converting to the devil had just been a joke?" Kaed village. Inside a humble thatched hut. Kikyo, Lin, and Kagam sat around a small table on the floor. "Guests, tea." A nervous little girl served them. Kagam took her cup of steaming tea. Well, it was technically tea, just a mix of leaves and petals. Kagam forced a polite smile. Even now, she still didn't fully understand what was happening. Just what kind of place was this? Had she traveled to the past? Kikyo remained composed. "Apologies. The hospitality is quite simple." Her gaze, however, never left the jewel in Lin's hand. She was tense the entire time. Lin smiled faintly, casually tossing the jewel into the air. Kikyo's breath caught. Her chin lifted slightly, her eyes following the jewel instinctively. She was terrified it might fall. Seeing her reaction, Lin chuckled softly. Kikyo snapped out of it, quickly lowering her gaze and returning to her cold demeanor. "Mr. Lin, the Shiken Jewel is an extremely dangerous artifact." Her expression turned serious as she began to explain the jewel's dangers. Kagam straightened her posture as well, nodding earnestly with a serious look on her face. Just then, Lin interrupted. "What do you think of my previous proposal?" Kikyo was briefly stunned. "Convert to a devil." Lin nodded, smiling. "How about it? Would you like to become my shrine maiden?" "Huh? Shrine maiden?" Kikyo was still processing when Kagam exclaimed in shock. Shrine maidens were supposed to serve gods. Was Lin implying that Kikyo would serve him? Whatever image flashed through her mind, Kagam's face turned crimson. Lin looked at her and said calmly, "You too." Kagam's neck twisted stiffly. She stared at Lin in disbelief. "Me? A shrine maiden?" Lin nodded. "Don't forget this is your payment." Kagam's mouth twitched. "I never agreed that becoming your shrine maiden was part of the reward. You can also choose not to pay." At that, Kagam's eyes lit up. But then Lin added in a darker tone, "Of course, I can't guarantee what will happen if you choose that." Kagam stiffened. Then decisively dropped to her knees. "Sorry. I'll do my best to become a proper shrine maiden." After witnessing Lin's strength firsthand, she knew better than to argue. Besides, if she became Lin's shrine maiden, he would probably protect her, right? After seeing those monsters, a lingering fear still haunted her. Becoming Lin's shrine maiden didn't seem that bad? At the very least, his overwhelming power gave her a sense of security. On the other side, seeing Kagam's quick compliance, Lin nodded in satisfaction and turned to Kikyo. Kikyo bit her lip and lowered her head. "I'm sorry." Even though Lin had saved Kaed village, it was still difficult for her to agree to become a devil's shrine maiden. "Kikyo, do you want to see Kaed village destroyed?" Lin's soft voice pierced her ears, making her heart tremble. What did he mean? Kikyo grew uneasy. If this man truly intended to destroy Kaed village, she wouldn't be able to stop him. Suddenly, clack! The crisp sound of the Shiken jewel hitting the table rang out. Kikyo looked up to see Lin casually placing the jewel on the table. Her eyes twitched involuntarily. The Shiken jewel, if it's not dealt with properly, Kaed village will eventually be wiped out. Kikyo was both startled and relieved. That's true. Her expression turned determined. I'll leave Kaed village with the jewel. Oh? And then? Then? Kikyo blinked, unsure what he meant. With the Shikan jewel in hand, no matter where you go, you'll draw monsters. Lynn said thoughtfully, maybe I should start calling you the Walking Disaster Shrine Maiden. Walking Disaster Shrine Maiden? Kikyo's heart clenched. Did that mean? Wherever she went, disaster would follow. If she carried the jewel, that might actually happen. And? Lynn continued in a deeper voice, can you keep protecting it forever? You're human. You have limits. There are things you simply can't handle. Kikyo fell silent. She thought back to today's crisis. She could have escaped safely with the jewel. But if Lynn hadn't intervened, the villagers of Maple Village would have. Thinking of that, it didn't seem so strange that they called Lynn a god. Besides, when she had prayed, the gods never answered. It was the devil who had responded. Maybe Lynn was right. Maybe the gods really were dead. If that was true, then God wouldn't blame her for converting. Besides, who said devils couldn't be gods? If I become your shrine maiden, can the problem of the Shikan jewel be solved? To be continued.